USB here?
Oh, yeah.
It shows up.
Okay. Hey, Rick.
I've never seen it.
So the file.
I added an overhead at the location.
Is there a
Quick question, sure. Do we have the mailboxes here for supervisors?
We have a general mailbox
I am
downstairs.
actually.
Okay. All of our mailboxes are downstairs for everybody else. So we just have a general supervisor's mailbox?
There is one downstairs?
Yes.
Where is it? I'm not familiar with it.
Okay, so right behind Kate's reception area, you come into the cubicle area. As soon as you come in, make a right, and all the mailboxes are right there. It just says Board of Supervisors.
I'm just curious, because this
that
was
came
delivered back in August.
Yeah, that came in.
I just got
I
it.
did not check.
I know, I'm just saying,
But that's the only thing he's gotten here.
right, but I'm just saying, how, if somebody does drop something out here, how am I supposed to know it's here?
It seems like you're the only one that gets mailed. Because nobody else gets it really.
It's just embarrassing. It's been a month and a half. All right. Well, I appreciate the mail coming to me in a timely manner.
Absolutely. Sure.
How are you? No, I lied. It was down there 2 weeks ago, because I went down there 3 weeks ago and found I had a crack across my ceiling.
Yeah, just
So it's a 1970s car. But I do have a unit above me, so I automatically had concerns with babies.
I might position the microphone.
So I contacted the HOA and I contacted my neighbor, because my neighbors live in Virginia. The HOA sent a plumber out there and said no.
Well, you can see
It felt moist to me, but that was really my fault. But the plumber said he put a moisture meter on it, it was none. So, Labor Day weekend, I went down there and
just be the house selling. I have one.
I said,
Sean, is this okay?
Especially with these storms we have, I have one spot in mine. My house is manufactured, which is really the same as a stick, except they just bring them flats and building them.
One is probably better, because it's in a nice.
In other words, I have 2x6s, not 2x4s in my walls. And everything's foam too. They foam all, not just all the sidewalls screws and all the, also they foam too. Anyway, one spot, it's,
I've been living with my phone screen every day.
no matter what I do, I can't see it. It's just the way the house sits.
Well, I thought the HOA said, look, if you fix it, if it comes back, we'll investigate it further. Because my concern is, okay, well, there's a 4 joists above me, has that moved? Is my concern. Because it had 2 cracks. Right on.
Yeah.
So,
Well, that's what it's doing, it's on the other side. Is that a load bearing, Joyce?
WWF. There's kids are up there. Swings around the floor.
Well, that'll do it too.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, has Mark had any incidents with COVID during the students?
Oh, that's right.
One of my students, I said she doesn't think she's positive, but she has to go get tested with the students. I said, one thing in class. So yes, please, Zoom in. Zoom in.
Mark said he's showing shot right now, I think. And a couple people coming back.
It's crazy.
He said like almost 200 confirmed on.
Well, that doesn't surprise me because they all got a bunch of pools on the weekend.
Yeah, you know they're not asking, and you know. Okay.
Okay, you ready?
We're ready, absolutely.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the West Goshen Township Board of Supervisors meeting of September the 21st, 2021. To start the meeting, will you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please note that because Chester County is currently still an area of substantial transmission of the COVID, we're requiring all attendees to wear a mask while seated or moving around. Thank you for your cooperation. Please be aware this meeting is being streamed on the Township YouTube channel, and also the meeting may be audio or video recorded by people present in the room. Our first agenda item this evening is item number 4, appointment of Assistant Township Manager, Assistant Township Secretary, Chris Bayshaw, and approval of Resolution 16/2021. Just have a couple of comments on this, Casey, and then the resolution.
I want to welcome Chris Bayshaw, formerly manager at Malvern Borough. He started work with us yesterday, and I want to welcome him and thank him for agreeing to work for West Goshen. He's a great addition to our team, and I know he'll work. He's already worked very well with the staff already. I know he'll work very well with the supervisors. So, welcome, Chris. Thank you. Absolutely.
Thank you, Casey. So, Chris, on behalf of the Board of Supervisors, I'd like to welcome you to West Goshen Township, and we look forward to working closely with you. Just to explain to the public, you have a Bachelor of Arts graduate degree from West Chester University. You have a Master's degree in Public Administration from Villanova University, as well as a graduate certificate in City Management. Since 2008, Chris has advanced his career in local government through a variety of administrative positions with several townships. Most recently, since 2016, Chris has been the Borough Manager at Malvern in Chester County, from where he joins us now. Chris has broad experience with municipalities planning code, the PA second-class township code, zoning and subdivision and land development, and through his management work he's gained knowledge of financial management issues, human resource management, and policy development. Chris has been successful in obtaining grant funding during his career and is a strong believer in cost-efficient delivery of local government services. So hopefully I can paraphrase your resume correctly there, and welcome. Thanks again for joining the West Goshen team. So we have a resolution this evening, Casey, resolution number 16/2021. I'm going to read that out, and then we'll ask the board to make a motion to adopt. Resolution number 16/2021, be it resolved that the Assistant Township Manager's 2021 salary shall be $125,000, resolved and adopted this 21st day of September. I have a motion to adopt this resolution.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Hugh. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Robin. Is there any board questions or comments on the motion? Are there any public comments or questions on this motion? Margie.
Hi, good evening. Welcome, Chris. Procedurally, I just have questions. I'm sure you made an outstanding choice, but I just want to understand, was this a hire by the township manager, or was this a hire by the board?
So we use a process where Casey and staff, meaning the HR support and other staff department heads, vetted resumes against advertisements that were placed for this position, selected a short list of, I believe, 6 candidates for a first round of interviews. Those interviews were conducted by staff, and then 2 board of supervisors were involved with the process into a final selection process of, I believe, 3 candidates for second round of interviews. Those were video recorded and shared with the rest of the board, and the board reviewed them and met an executive session to decide who should be made an offer.
Great, okay. And then just out of curiosity, how many applications total did you receive?
I think we received 26 or 27 resumes. Yeah.
Oh, and one last question. On an organizational chart, do direct reports report to the assistant manager, who reports to the manager, or does the manager still retain direct reports? Like organizationally, how does that work?
So I believe there's no change to the organizational structure we had before. It's simply that Mr. Bayshore will replace Mr. Davis on that organizational chart that we've had previously.
Correct.
Thank you.
I had a motion and a second. Do you have any other public comments or questions? Okay, we're ready to take a vote. All those in favor of approval say aye. Aye. Any in opposition say nay. Thank you. The motion carries 5-0. Moving on to agenda item number 5, 305 West Town Road land development approval. Rick?
This is a land development approval for a 16,000 square foot gym athletic complex located on West Town Road. Here, building is situated here, surrounded by parking, underground stormwater facilities here and here. There is no direct discharge to PennDOT facilities, so we avoided the HOP issue. And the site did not infiltrate, so the applicant used the modified release concept, which is approved by DEP and the County Conservation District as an alternative to infiltration. There were no zoning issues. Plans were reviewed, comments were addressed, and it was presented to the Planning Commission last week at their meeting, and they recommended approval. And if you have any further questions that I can't answer, we have a representative of the engineer with us this evening as well.
So does the board have any questions for the representative or Rick?
Yeah, I have a question. Rick, there was some issue about the size of the driveway. Does that meet all of the ordinances for the township and also PennDOT requirements?
I'm not sure what driveway issues you're referring to.
I think just the width of it, the size of it.
Meets all township ordinances. It did require a PennDOT highway occupancy permit since it's a state highway, so if they had any issues with it, they have been addressed. It's been a clear letter from PennDOT.
Did they review the line of sight?
They did,
Okay.
and it was acceptable.
This land has not been developed at this point, correct? So
Correct.
This is the first development on that. So just explain again the way that the stormwater management is going to equal the current, or better, the current capability of that ground to absorb rainfall. We're all very sensitive at the moment, Rick, as you can well imagine, to more impervious cover. So just give us a little explanation as to why we don't expect this will introduce new issues with stormwater.
I'll let you know.
I can take over. So what we had to do, since the site wasn't infiltrated due to high groundwater on the site, as well as some other infiltration areas of bedrock, the system's designed to retain the water and slowly release it in a function so that it doesn't impact the municipal systems or any of the stream downslope of the area. And since this is a conservation district has just recently instituted the managed release concept, in which, based on the amount of impervious acreage you're proposing on the site, you have to reduce it by a certain factor to help slow it down even more. So the beds are sized to hold the water back long enough within a 7-day period to slowly release it into the system instead of just letting it discharge off the site like it's currently doing now. And per those regulations, as well as the townships, we have to either meet or exceed the reduction in rate from what it's doing now, which I believe we're doing.
So just to be clear, so now the current infiltration capacity is very low.
Yes.
So where does a large rainfall go from this property? Is
So
it where-
most of the rainfall runs off the property down into West Town Road, and there's a sump area to the left of where the proposed driveway is, where there's an existing culvert or head wall that's kind of crushed at the moment. It would drain out across the properties and continue downslope into the nearby tributaries to a watershed.
So the retention in these new infiltration basins, the storage, is going to release into that same culvert.
Yes.
And that crushed culvert, as you call it, is it part of this property or
So
is it PennDOT?
it's part of the PennDOT right away, and per what we're doing with the HOP permit, it's going to be replaced and fixed up to a certain section, and it's going to be evaluated by their inspector to make sure that nothing else is damaged and be replaced as needed out on the site when they uncover the pavement. Because there's already been one repair over in that section already as part of the PennDOT right-of-way improvements.
Just one other question, is the front of the building, it looks like, are those handicap parking spots on the left there that?
Yes, sir.
So is that where the front of the building is, close to
Yeah,
there?
so there's going to be a front door there, and there's more than likely going to be another door somewhere else on the facility, but that's going to be the main entrance on the front. They're still in the process of finalizing all the entrances on the site.
I have no other questions. Board members, do you have any other questions?
Yeah, do you mind if I have a question? I just have two questions here looking at this. So one of them was sidewalks. Are there sidewalks along West Town Road?
Yes, there are.
Okay,
Part of
great.
the permit that we just revised all the grading to add some more sidewalks going up to the edge of the property.
Okay. And the other one is outdoor light conformance, just as far as lighting is concerned, because there are residences actually back there. What can you tell me about that?
I believe we have backlight shielding on the any light poles that are on the site, and we reduced the Kelvin rating of the light, so it's not as bright. It doesn't produce that bright blue light that most people see on some of the newest LED light fixtures that go up. So we kind of reduced it to that point. Without taking a greater look at the plans, I couldn't give you more specifications on what is actually on there. I'd have to have in front of me to recall the details.
Yeah, I'm just concerned because there is a cemetery right there, and there's some residences back there, and I don't know the hours of the proposed facility or whether there would even be lighting coming out of the back, but I would just want to make sure that that wasn't something that was going to be causing problems.
The only lighting should be on for the parking facilities themselves,
Okay.
and from what I can recall, it's not going to be running throughout the night. I'd have to check back with the engineer
Sure.
in the morning, but I can definitely get that information over to you once I get back to the office.
That would be great. Thank you.
And I reviewed the lighting plan, and the light intensities are less than 0.2 foot candles of the property line, which is in compliance with our code.
Any other board questions?
I have one other question. On the landscaping, this area was clear-cut to a large extent before construction began. How many trees were replaced? And there we go. And is that sufficient number of trees to replace those that were removed?
The answer is yes. These are the requirements. The trees that were removed somewhere in here. Anyway, the amount of trees removed was replaced, and the additional trees required by the ordinance as if it was an empty site were also added. So we actually have more trees here than is required by the code. And it's a total of
26.
about 56 trees roughly.
Are there any other board questions? Does someone want to make a motion for approval of the final lab development plan for this facility at 305 West Town Road?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, John. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Robin. On the motion and a second, are there any final board comments or questions? Are there any public comments or questions? Tina? Tina, it's a little hard to hear you either. If you want to come and use the mic or stand up and speak. Thank you.
And Chris Bayshore is taking minutes.
Okay.
He's brand new to us. He has no idea who any of you are, so please tell him who you are.
Hi, Chris, welcome. I'm
Very good.
Tina
Thank you.
Martineau.
Thank you. Thanks.
One question I have, do you know if an environmental site assessment is going to be performed on the property, either with groundwater, wells, or soil samples procurement?
We did check for limiting factors, and there was no known contamination at the time when we looked at it. But we did notice that there was high groundwater on the site, as well as there's a high towards the back at the site is where the bedrock starts to get closer to the surface. Towards the front of the site where we had the infiltration beds, which when they were previously infiltration beds, but after we did testing, we determined that we had to do detention because of the fact that the groundwater was so high and the poor capability for the soil to infiltrate all that runoff. They would just fail immediately. That's why we would switch to a detention system.
Okay, but no environmental site assessment is going to be planned?
No, we did some testing on the site, but based on all the conditions that we found at the time, there was no need to do an environmental impact on the site, given its site history and characteristics.
Okay. Thank you.
Are there any other public comments, Doug? I'm going to get Chris Shahane.
Hi, welcome Chris. I'm Doug White, 1001 Woodview, Westchester, West Goshen. Yes, on the planning commission, we did approve this, but I wanted to just, I forgot to ask something at that meeting, if they could, and just a suggestion, if they could consider extra screening on the north and west part of the property in terms of vegetative screening. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Are there any other public comments or questions? Okay, so we have a motion and a second. I'm going to take a vote. So all in favor of approval of the final land development plan for the new facility at 305 West Town Road, say aye. Aye. All those in opposition say nay. Vote carries 5-0. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time. Okay, next on the agenda is item number 6, presentation and discussion of proposal for a splash pad at the community park. I believe we have with us a Mr. Hemler. Welcome.
Hello, hello. My name is Will Hemler. I'm with General Recreation in Newtown Square. Thanks for having me tonight. I'm here to kind of go over what I created was a proposal and kind of conceptual drawing to kind of show you what a spray park would be like, and then kind of discuss budgetary components of it. So here's the proposed location. Between the basketball courts and the amphitheater and the community park. Now I have this design is kind of, we based it on some conditions where we wanted to have about 100 users and about 25 square foot a user, 2,500 square foot pad as we designed. So that's where we came up with the concept for it. Now what still needs to be figured out is it still needs to be site designed. By an engineer has to place it on the site, figure where the water line comes in, drainage lines go out, elevations. My company will design the construction documents for the pad itself and all the features, but then we stop at the edge of the pad. So there will be an engineering firm that we would normally team up with or work with a township engineer. However it comes to it, that all those components still have to come together. So this is not a complete plan, but we're trying to show the location and the concept. So again, here's the plan view showing basically the dimensions of it. We broke it into 2 sections, kind of a family section and more of a dynamic water play that gives you, a lot of features and variety for families. But then we did a smaller little semicircle, half circle there that is more for toddlers. So when we designed these, because of traffic and children running around and all the excitement, it's very nice when you can have a separate area for the younger children. And so that was the point of that, but also during our initial discussions, seeing the topography out there, we kind of did a tiered system to work with the natural topography, which looked really nice, made a lot of sense. And then we could do a ADA accessible pathway, a ramp down to the toddler area, and have that tie in together.
What is the drop from one level to the other? Is it 1 or 2 or? We
don't know. We didn't shoot elevations. Again, when engineering gets to that point, then that will all be answered. My estimation is around 18 inches. I'm also estimating that too because in our conceptual, I thought it'd be fun to introduce a sitting wall in there, and that would make a lot of sense. And then what do we do with that? Do we add shade? All things that we need to address during the design.
It's not a big job. is it?
No, not big at all.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Craig? Oh, there you go. Thank you.
It is an issue.
And here's kind of what I was talking about. We try to separate the areas where it's basically the water effects that's happening, the sensations. So you have the small water effects for the taller area. Family zone gets kind of a middle level. And then you get your dynamic zone where you have a lot bigger, more impressive, everybody gets wet type zone. That, kind of brings people in. But you still have to create like a community park for everybody. And then a 3D rendering. Now I show a fence separating because obviously we don't want to step down when they run. You move down from one level to another. That fence is there really to, give us an idea that there will be fencing. We don't know the extent of the fencing. How that is it going to be? Is the taller area going to be fully fenced in? I would imagine, but to be determined based on budget and engineering and all the other little pieces that come together to make the design. And then this shows more of a centerpiece where that is, it's also inclusive. You can twirl that piece around, users can move it, and it gets a kind of a basket weave water effect on it. So instead of just being staggered water spraying, there is more what we call inclusive play happening too. And it's wheelchair accessible. The big thing I also want to say too, to get back to the 2,500 square feet, that's based on 100 users. With that 100 users though, at that 2,500 square feet, we're at 100 gallons per minute. So, even though it's 100 gallons per minute, it's user activated. The water park only turns on when a user is there to press the button to turn it on. Water features come on, run for about 5 minutes, and then turn on. And I have separate activators on the lower level and the top level. So if there's only toddlers show up, only the lower level's running. And if nobody's at the big level, and so forth. And then the whole thing is on timer. So hours of operation. So you can set where even if you press the button, if the timer's not on to let the water system run, it won't turn on. It'll only run during the certain hours that are pre-programmed. And then those hours will be determined by the township. And especially at the gallons per minute. And, again, I do reiterate this is conceptual and I want to get everybody's feedback and see what you thought about that. And if the gallons per minute can go up or can they go down, we design accordingly. We will look for your feedback on that part. And it is a pass-through system. So the water will come through the system, through the manifold, through the features, to the drain, and out to sanitary. It's not a recirculating system on this proposal.
You said out to sanitary?
Yep.
Is it sanitary or storm, Greg?
Apparently sanitary.
It would have chlorine in the water.
Okay.
If it's chlorinated, it has to be sanitary.
How much maintenance is to treat the water?
Well, that's the thing about pass-through. None. It comes through, it's already treated water. It comes through, sprays, it goes all over the users, down the drain, and then again out the sanitary stormwater management.
Is it public water? Or
Yes.
So are we going to have to add chlorine to it?
No.
No,
It's already chlorinated.
yeah.
That's right. And that's why a lot of municipalities do like that, because you can do recirculating systems.
Yeah, why don't you explain that briefly for the crowd?
Okay.
Recirculating versus freshwater or passive?
Well, recirculating, so it comes in, goes to about a 3,000 or 4,000 gallon holding tank. Has to be treated with chemicals daily. Someone needs to check the chemicals, regulations-wise, at least twice a day. And in reality, probably about every 2 hours. You also have cartridge filters that need to be replaced. They run about $500 for 4 of them, depending on how many users there are. Like say you have 200 users show up, and it can happen. Then that could shut down the system. Then you have to clean the tank out, move up the chemicals. And so there's a lot of staff involved and a lot of maintenance involved in a recirculating system.
And you got a winterizer too.
Yeah, and recirculating systems too, Just because, you know, you have a big tank and let's say a lot of users came with one shot and the water, you can't get the chemistry right again. And so you have to dump 4,000 gallons and then refill it. And that would happen probably 4 or 5 times through the season as well, on top of it. So it's the maintenance of the water chemistry, the maintenance of the filters, diaphragms that go through with the manifold systems, the recirculating. So you add that all together, the pass-through eliminates all of it. Also, it's from a cost point of view. A recirculating system, to add to my projected budget numbers, would be about another $150,000 in equipment only. Then another, you know, without seeing final construction drawings, I would estimate another $200,000 in installation on top of that. So it's a lot of upfront money, plus all that extra maintenance, and then the true cost of maintaining it yet too. Whereas if you have a pass-through, that eliminates all those components. So that's the real value.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
Also, is there a non-skid deck?
Well, we do have a light room finish, and that is fine.
It's a non-skid.
Yeah. Because they can do all sorts of coatings on them, and then you get into the ASTM non-skid regulations. You can do that, but then that starts peeling up. I've done lots of spray parks for Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and in those environments, it's always concrete, and has worked well. Low maintenance, inexpensive, no issues with safety. And it seems like when you do put coatings down, they start having all sorts of issues, and they're almost not worth it, in my experience. And if you meet the surfacing guy, tell him I didn't say that. So that's what I'm going to go through with.
I just have a question.
Yeah.
So are you saying that if we wanted to go lower than 100 gallons per minute, that the design would be smaller?
Would shrink. Yep.
Okay.
Because we kind of think 25 square foot per user.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the thoughts at our initial meetings was, well, 100 users would be what we want to see. So with that, that's where I came up with 2,500.
And every one of these water, I don't know what to call them, systems are all user activated.
Or
So nothing's running full time.
No, they're, the whole system is user activated.
Okay.
And then they're sequenced. So not all of them are running for that. Let's say it turns on for 5 minutes. Not all, they take turns dancing around.
Oh, I see, okay.
Or you can control them to have 5 come on, the other 5 come on, endless combination of how you want them to turn on.
Okay.
And then sequencing is done on pass-through systems to try to get the GPM down, so it's not all on. So,
And how effective can that be? Can you know, have a 50% turn down on it?
maybe 20. You know, just because like that centerpiece, you want that kind of running, because that's when that's the center everybody's playing on. They got that basket weave going. There's some that you want. Otherwise, what you don't want to do is have everybody running across the deck trying to get to the one that's going to turn on next. So there is common sense involved. So that's why I will fire a couple of them. It's usually, you know, just trying to, I look at the GPM in the final design. And then, so when this is installed, I program the controller with you and determine what is the most efficient way, but also having the experience. You don't want to shut something off that doesn't make the part as fun for everything you just did. So that, you know, there is a functional recreation type view to it.
So you just, I mean, I know you have some slides that are really the individuals do.
Oh yeah, that was just for, yeah.
So maybe we can go to the kind of board questions, because I've got some, I'm sure there's quite a few questions too. So, John, you want to start over there? And
Sure.
The questions you have?
You say you've done these several other locations, you mentioned a couple of places. In your experience there, what safety issues did the splash pad bring upon the municipality where you installed?
Safety issues.
Safety issues. Children slipping, falling, getting hurt.
I mean, I haven't had anything that was because of design. you can have safety issues from, running, pushing, shoving, just in general, on an open deck. I tell you, the scariest thing is always just water chemistry with recirculating systems. Is making sure that's right, because that's one thing you don't want to get wrong. Even get to the whole point with cryptosporidium, you want to have UV systems put on, they get pretty in depth there. But for a pass-through system, it's pretty simple. There's not a lot to go wrong, if anything. There's no standing water. There's, if the concrete's done right, it's a safe, wet place to walk. That's a good question. I just haven't ran into anything where I've got a call back about something that could have been done better, or something that wasn't designed right, or something was designed in a way that led to a situation. If anything, the water park turns off too soon. I wish I had more for you, but that's my answer.
That's fair enough. Following from that question, what additional legal liability as far as insurance underwriting would we have to assume if we, that's for Casey, I suppose?
Sure. I've already had some low-key discussions with Bob Hall, our broker, and they obviously prefer splash pads to pools. No pools, no pools, no pools, for obvious reasons. They've never had a case of any drownings or anything like that with a splash pad. The only liability is just property liability if someone would vandalize the facility. There's no outward liability for, as a user, to go there and get injured. It's all on the property side where someone comes in with a baseball bat at 3 o'clock in the morning and wrecks the park. That's where it comes into it. But we have facilities all over the township, so it's just another added facility that could be exposed to vandalism. That's all. That's the only exposure we would have.
So I know you don't have a dollar figure, but you don't anticipate it to be a rather large additional cost for the township as far as insurance is concerned?
No, we currently run about $90 million in coverage already on all of our facilities, so this would be just a little tiny incremental bump in expense, if anything.
Okay, so have you ever had any litigation associated with an injury sustained at the skateboard park, which to me is
Not a one. I've been here 15 years. It was installed in 2005? 2005, 2006. Not a one. We've had injuries there, but everything's big disclaimers, and we've never had a claim against the township.
And with all the, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
All the upright features are stainless steel and powder coated. So as far as talking about bringing it back, it's made for urban environments. We design them all over the country, Asia and Europe, for that environment.
One other question. I look at your itemized list here on your proposal. The equipment is, this is from CoStars, is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Is that equipment all proprietary? In other words, is it that only certain installers can install this equipment, or is it readily available for any other installer?
We prefer to use certified manufacturer installers. Everything is made in Minnesota, all U.S. steel. It's about 12 weeks to manufacture and ship, and then again goes right to contractors that have been installing it for have experience doing it, especially water parks. They're you want to make sure the water lines, positive drainage, everything has the right connections, manifolds, good plumbing practice. Where some contractors are, maybe structural in nature, water parks are a different organism. So we like to use contractors that absolutely know what they're doing and have done before.
So can I follow up on that? So I'm not clear how this works, Katie, maybe you can help me here. So we've got what to me seems like a turnkey approach. We would basically be looking to a vendor like General Recreation that can do soup to nuts on this project.
Correct.
Do we have an obligation to bid this system?
The only thing we would have to bid is the site work. Is that correct?
Well, they would do the site, your own site work up to the site, bringing the water line in, the drainage line to the site, the meter pit, because you have to have a water meter, backflow preventer, where that's going to be, how that's done. That would all have to be done by a township or others.
Okay. So that would be the portion that would be bid out. We can work with Aqua, maybe to have them install the water line for us. I doubt that's going to happen. Dave, yeah, right. So those are the kind of things that we would have to look to bid out.
Okay, so the rest, but would we have to bid the concept of a splash pad turnkey project provider, or is it, can we select the particular vendor without it being a bid process?
Everything's on CoStar's, including the installation of the actual pad.
Correct.
Okay.
Everything
So
outside the pad would be
CoStar
us.
price. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Go ahead, John.
No, that was me.
Ashley.
So thank you so much for the presentation. I really like the design.
Awesome.
Because I have a toddler and I have an 8-year-old, so I feel like a lot of families around here, they've got kids of different ages. And to kind of touch on what you said, John, to be honest with you, my kids are playing at the playground in East Goshen and here, and they're going to the pool, and I feel like there's a lot of danger sort of lurking, in recreational places anyway. So I don't really think that a splash pad is going to add anything to that. My question is why this particular spot in the park? What made you?
I think we did kind of our own survey. We walked the area, see where it would fit, where there's space available. It was next to the concession building, where we walked through, and then so there's bathrooms there. So, and then following the landscape, there's a great spot right on top, right by the amphitheater and the basketball. And it seemed to make sense. You had sidewalks kind of coming in already. Even though there was some elevation changes, it still was a good place for placing it. It seemed like a very open spot. Other than that, though, I don't have a lot to say about it until we get engineering to say, yeah, the water, because let's say that there's an issue with, you don't want to trench forever to get there. It would be too costly, wouldn't make sense. So we still have to make sure that all the utilities are where they are, but if that location does make sense. We think it makes sense now, but it definitely has to go to engineering first.
Okay.
To confirm.
That's all.
Okay.
Who's next? Go ahead.
My first question is really cost, total cost, and it has to do with where it fits in our budget.
So can I ask a question? Would we be able to use restricted parks for this? Okay, so I think it would probably come out of restricted parks, of which we have about how much? 800,000 right now?
We had almost 900,000 last month. So with the woodlands going the way it is, you get $2,500 per home in woodlands. It's growing and growing and growing by the day.
And we need to spend that money within
3 years.
So I believe that all this would come out of restricted parks fuel.
You were over at 929,000 on that account. As of now, 929.
Okay. Now, is there sufficient in there to finish the walkways and so forth through woodlands?
That's completely on the developer. It's a turnkey park to us. We have nothing to do with that.
You don't have to.
All the 7 miles
We
of
don't have
trails.
the budget for that.
No, that's all coming to us turnkey. Ready to go.
And then, the other one is sort of a technical thing.
Sure.
You mentioned that the fixtures are stainless steel. Is it 304, 316, what?
304.
304, so that technically it could rust if it really came down to it.
Well, they are powder coated. They're coated in a zinc epoxy, zinc-rich epoxy powder coat, and then super TGIC powder coat on top. So they do a nice job, and we don't have real issues with rusting. We do have a 25-year corrosion warranty, so if there is corrosion, we'll take care of it.
25 years.
We also did your skate park too. Same manufacturer, so you know that my neck is beat pretty good. I always like driving by, and I remember building it. Their coatings, they make great choices on, because it has to last. We don't want it to. It costs a little more for a reason. It holds up very well.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, I only have one question, and that is, given what you've given us as samples, examples of what it could look like,
Yeah.
do we have a time frame that we can utilize to evaluate ourselves? Not that we're experts in it, but if there were certain types of items that we all agreed we would like to see them,
Sure.
come back to you and talk to you about that?
Anytime, absolutely. My only thing, I'm going to be here for a while. I've been with General Recreation 20 years. If it does take longer, I'm in no rush. I'd like to get the design right. I'm all about that. The best thing to do is go to our website, look at different things. The trouble that you get into sometimes, though, is picking the pieces that cost a lot of money and then have high flow. And so, it can look great and be like, oh, this piece would be fantastic, but it doesn't fit the design as a pass-through in the square footage and in how it interworks with all the other features. You kind of build them as a system. And they have their own spray zones and splash zones, so you don't cross over one. Some you can, some you don't. If there's things that you don't like about it, that's good. And if there's things you'd like to see, because I can come back with a lot of times a wish list. If you say, look, these are 10 things that we saw that we thought would be great. Can they fit in the design without increasing the cost? Because I'm sure we don't want to go any higher than my proposed. That's I'm trying to set a budget too. So knowing that budget, I'm always trying to get more into it at the same budget because, you can't go up. So, but if I know that, I can go to my aquatic designers and say, hey, the community and the board like these pieces, these certain pieces. How do we incorporate them? Can we incorporate them? What's the price for that? And see if it works. There's a lot of times I do, not afraid to do revisions. So if you think, and we will through the process, this is really my first attempt at what I think would be a great park. Covers all our bases. My designers, I work with my aquatic designers on it as well. So it's not just a simple conceptual that I came up with. It had some thought put into it.
It was already very informative. So
Good.
thank you.
Okay. But yeah, to answer your question, if there is any design, absolutely. I guess you could let Ken or Casey know. And when we're getting to the next stage would be kind of finalizing the conceptual so that can be given to the engineer so they can make sure it fits on the site.
Yeah, since we're talking about it, just an idea. The only thing, is there going to be any place for shade?
Yes, well, and that was the next part that's not included in those budget numbers,
Okay.
is adding a shade structure to it. And there was talk about having, because we do fabric ones, but we can also, I do represent another manufacturer that does steel in co-stars, under co-stars. So doing some kind of steel roofs, maybe have it bend with that the double, so it covers the taller area and covers, the family area. Something that makes sense. And then when you're designing all that, you also need benches, sitting areas. How does that get incorporated into the design? It doesn't affect the splash zones. And also, again, square footage, everything's square footage. So if you took it, then the concrete price goes up, the excavation, the stone, the rebar needed. If the idea is, yes, we want to spend a little bit more money on having shade, I will create a new concept of what that would look like and what that would cost and how that's addressed to work within the spray park. I really like the idea of having one in the center like that as well. Makes a lot of sense. A lot of times you just see a pavilion stuck to the side, kind of not a lot of forethought or maybe, but I really, from a design perspective, it's great to have someplace when you're at the water park, you can be inside, get shade, and watch your children.
Yeah, we do have the pavilion, which is not far away, and we could be maybe a little bit creative about planting some more tree cover area, which might actually take a while to fill out. So
True.
that's all stuff I think we should talk about. So thanks.
Absolutely, and we have, the fabric structures are pretty strong too.
So is that the one that they have at East Goshen Park? They have a fabric structure at the playground.
They do.
It's a big,
Yeah,
I think it's fabric,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, those are your most cost effective, by far. Especially if you know the price of steel right now.
Right.
It's unbelievable. So, but we can address that in the next stage of design.
Rob, do you have any more questions?
No.
Okay, so I have a couple of questions too. So the number of days a year is typically run, so like the ones in Philadelphia, is it Memorial Day through Labor Day?
Correct.
Basically, that kind of 90-day period.
And hours of operation, usually 11 to 7 for that.
And the basis of 100 people, 2,500 square feet, is there If you look at the size of our township population, the surrounding communities, what's the kind of?
No, that was given to me by Ken Lear, that he would like to see at least be have capacity for 100 users at a time. Because there'll be days where there'll be a lot of users show up, especially in the beginning. The first year, it's everybody's excited about it. It's variety, everybody wants to use it.
Just a question of Dave, 100 gallons a minute into sanitary sewer, we're going to have to resize a line out of the park.
We're going to have to take a look at it.
We're going to have to be quite a distance, right?
Yeah. But we're also looking next year doing the family gatherings and all that.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of work going on in that area, so it's prime time to do it.
Okay. We would have to look at it, could be part of the infrastructure to enable it. In terms of the kind of annual maintenance cost for managing this, it's one thing to have the money to put it in.
Sure.
In a capital, then you've got, now you're committed to maintaining an amenity going forward. Great to hear that other than vandalism, the concrete and the fixtures designed for nice longevity. So what are the annual kind of maintenance costs you might think there would be for this kind of facility?
Typically, it comes down to picking up trash, cleaning the drains out. They get covered, clean them out. You don't have baskets. Again, it's all pass-through, so you don't have all that going to a recirculating system and all those different checks to be cleaned out.
Okay.
Sometimes kids will stick things in the nozzles.
Are the nozzles easily removed?
Not at all. No.
Not at all?
No, but it's just, you can't help. Somebody finds a little twig, tree branches and things, and just like, hey, look, I can almost.
Because if that happens and something gets jammed in there, can they be removed?
Oh, of course, yeah, yes. They are removable, but not by.
Not easily.
Not by the users.
Okay.
You do have, because it's sequenced, the manifold will have solenoid valves across it, and they have diaphragms. And if the debris gets into a diaphragm, it won't let the feature work. So you have to pull the valve apart, clean the diaphragm, put the diaphragm back in, and put the 12 screws back in. I think you could use 4 screws, but somehow the manufacturer put 12 screws to make it even harder. But that will happen from time to time. That doesn't happen very often, though, on a pass-through system that's having city water coming through. It's really, that happens when recirculating might miss something. A bobby pin somehow found its way, worked its way through. Even missed the basket, missed the filter, and those feature pumps found its way to the manifold and so on.
Okay.
But maintenance is extremely low. I would just think it's just cleaning. Power wash the deck from time to time. And then what we were going to do in the design is do a winterization pit. So when it's time to winterize, you just go into the pit, open the valves, and it'll drain all the lines down. So you don't have to winterize it with antifreeze or slushy or flurry of mixture.
Okay.
So that made it real easy for winterization.
Good. The railing that's shown in the design, was that included in that construction number you had in here or not?
No, not the fencing, but the installation was. Because I sent it to my installer, and he was like, well, there's going to be that fencing, so he did include that in that initial number.
That rail right there,
Yep.
that is included or not included?
It's not included.
Not the equipment that's included in the installation cost?
It's included in installation cost, but not in the material cost.
Okay. Thank you.
Because we don't know which fence it's really going to be.
I think that was it for my questions. So thank you very much. That was informative.
Oh, thank you.
Just to share with the board some thoughts from me. So, we talked about using the restricted parks fund. We have a balance in there. That would be a new amenity. My preference would be that we look at making sure that we fund repair our existing amenities first. So tennis courts, basketball courts, resurfacing, whatever's needed for that. We certainly would want to do this project in my mind, in conjunction with an additional bathroom. For 2 reasons. One is the additional attraction of this feature and the usage that we're going to bring onto the park. And the second factor being, we're going to have to look at the sanitary sewer system, which I missed before this evening, in terms of the total flow that we can handle. And we want to do those projects together in my mind. So those are just some thoughts from me. So in terms of next steps, what is the board's thoughts, or Casey, what do you think?
Yeah, I would just suggest the board individually look through the proposal and see if there's anything else you'd like to see offered at this site. We can talk with Carroll Engineering about getting maybe a cost estimate to do the site work. We'd have to have a survey done.
We have a rough estimate. They haven't seen the diagram.
Oh, that's right, that's right.
Given, just talking over scope of work and all, they're thinking around 24,000, but without, everything's all conceptual. That can go up and down depending on what we do.
Do we need to wait till you get a handle on the bathroom project, and sewer line size and that kind of thing? If the board supports putting these together.
That's going to kind of go along with the scope of this.
But is there any more scope here that you need to understand what that would look like, the bathroom?
No, I can forward this.
Okay.
Yeah,
Chris,
okay. Because we have a general location.
So that's really, to me, the next step is to look at, okay, if we do this project as scope now, with some fine tuning or whatever, what would be the additional cost of the infrastructure to support both this and the money needed for the bathroom addition?
Right. Yes, we can do that.
Can I ask a question? So would, looking at that sanitary sewer line, would all of that work be covered under restricted parks too?
These are park improvements.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
if they're needed for this park, yes.
Okay.
Needed for this facility at the park, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, in fact, bathrooms too,
Yeah,
yeah, or the
it's
bathrooms
a
are
park
part of that,
improvement.
yes.
So the bathrooms, the work to look at the sewer,
Yeah, sanitary
and,
sewer upgrade
and the splash pad would all be under restricted parks, or could be under restricted parks.
Correct.
And,
Maintenance of too. I
Yeah,
would say
maintenance
the
of it as
maintenance
well.
of that is for maintenance.
okay, so maintenance would be under it too. And the other thing that I wanted to ask was, what was I gonna ask? I've lost it. Oh, just a timeline.
A senior moment?
Yeah, a concussion moment. It was a concussion moment. Timeline, time frame. So would this be something that we might be able to get in by next summer?
Go ahead, well, you're the
Well,
expert.
I would think for my company to create our construction documents, say 3 to 5 weeks, say a month. Engineering, if they have to tie it into bathrooms, and then where those lines are coming in, drains are going out, they're gonna share it. There's gonna be air gaps involved. There's most things happening.
Yeah.
I would think that's 2 months, 3 months in engineering.
I think we could push them a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah, they have some of the preliminary already done that.
Yeah, I mean, we had community park surveyed
Yeah.
not too long ago, a survey of the entire park, so we have a base topography already of the park, so we can work from that and move forward.
I mean, my thought on the timeline would be, we do whatever design work is necessary to get an accurate number to approve in a budget by December.
Okay.
So like December is our deadline to approve a budget for expenditures in 2022.
Yep.
So if we're well enough along between, getting this through a design that gives us an accurate enough cost estimate to approve a budget number. It's not be the exact final number, but at least something we think is the ballpark for this year. Could we get this all done and installed by Memorial Day?
Oh, yeah.
You've got the basketball court project going on right above it.
Yeah.
All tied together. It would be very tight.
So
we might want to.
But what about midsummer?
I would be 12 weeks for manufacturing just for me.
Okay.
And then I would think my installer would be 2 months or so to install it.
So if you had an order by January or February,
Still couldn't get it done by.
Still
Yeah,
July.
plus
to do it.
my crews are installing projects that are being ordered today in spring. All the crews. It's very busy.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Yeah. And then we take 12 weeks to manufacture. So all that, I would think, yeah, it's not, we couldn't do it by summer.
Okay.
Does your design include any mud mitigation?
Mud
Well,
mitigation.
Park and Rec Board had concerns about the surrounding area, grass areas becoming muddy and messy.
There's a 5-foot deck that comes off the spray zones to keep it on, where there's no water, to keep the water in onto the actual wet deck. So that is our.
So that's an impervious that perimeter.
Yes.
Yeah, there's no water spraying out into the grass at all. It's all kept within the concrete pad.
It has a perimeter drain with the concrete on the other side, all pitched to the drain.
Right.
So, you know,
Yeah, there's no sheet flow off of it into the grass or anything.
And, yeah, and there's no landscape architecture being done yet on it either,
Right.
like, you know, grasses or what's gonna happen, or, so that needs to be designed. Again, I'm just designing the pad and the space, kind of floating in space right now. And all those things need to be figured out by an LA and engineer, on how it's gonna really work with the site tie-in.
Are there any other public comments?
Let me just ask one last question. You mentioned a couple places where you built these. Do you have any local around this area? We could take a look.
Bristol, I have a large recirculating system. City of Philadelphia probably have.
I mean, anything in Chester County? Anywhere around here?
I'm trying to think.
I know there's one in Downingtown, but I don't know if you did that one or not. That's one in Coatesville.
That's in East Cal Township, right behind on Bell Tavern Road. That's the closest one.
Which one? Where is it?
Bell Tavern behind the Wawa, across the Wegmans.
Yep, it's right across from the Wegmans, right on Business 30, right behind the Wawa, underneath the 30-buck. It's closed for the season, but...
Yeah, I haven't seen it up for a while, actually.
Yeah, I think they might have closed the town early. Yeah, but they close it Labor Day, typically.
Where is that site in Philadelphia?
Carmela Rec Center, man, I can email a whole list. I have 2 pages of locations.
Yeah, would you do that? Yeah.
I'd like to
Let me
go
do
and
that.
see it.
They all start blending in after, well, like, you know, quite a few parts.
Very good. Well, thank you, Will. We appreciate your time this evening
Thank
and
you all for
walking
having
through
me.
this good conversation.
Excellent. Thank you. Have a great night.
Thanks, Will.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, next on the agenda is item number 7, presentation and discussion of a draft Woodlands of Greystone Park management plan prepared by Natural Lands.
We have Kelsey Boyd from Natural Lands. Welcome.
Welcome, Kelsey.
Thank you for having us tonight. So I believe there's a presentation. Yes, thank you. So I'm Kelsey Boyd. I'm the Stewardship Planning Program Manager of Natural Lands. Here with me tonight is Gary Gimber, our Regional Director of Land Stewardship, and Mike Cole, one of our preserve managers.
Welcome.
Thank you. For anyone not familiar with Natural Lands, we're an environmental nonprofit located in southeastern PA and southern New Jersey. We focus on preserving land, caring for nature, and connecting people to the outdoors. So what we're working on right now is a stewardship plan to help guide care and management of the Woodlands Park. So next slide, please. So this plan really just focuses in on the natural resources. There's other work being done on the trails, but this really doesn't touch on that. And it's meant to be a complement to their serpentine barrens on the property, which is a special unique feature. But this doesn't cover that, it's just a complement to it, and Gary will talk about that towards the end of the presentation. Next slide, please. The plan includes 4 main pieces. There's a site assessment that goes over the existing conditions at the park. This includes what we discovered with on-the-ground site assessments, so walking the whole area, as well as mapping, digital mapping that we did. We then looked at all of the natural resources there and prioritized the main ones so that you knew what your most important features were to protect and improve. We then created a draft list of recommendations and did supportive mapping for both the recommendations and the site assessment piece. Next slide, please. So just for orientation, the large gray parcel in the middle includes the park. And it's a little hard to see, but Westchester's right below it. Pottstown Pike runs right to the west of it. Next slide, please. The whole parcel there isn't park, as you know. It is both park and development. So you can see within the orange, where it's mostly forested and around the streams, is where the park is located. So it does protect most of the natural resources on the site. Next slide. This map shows the water features. So you can see Taylor Run runs along the west, and there's 2 tributaries towards it. There's also ponds, floodplains, wetlands, and hydric soils. And all these are really important for the water quality of the site. Next slide. When we walked the property, we actually looked at the different plants at the site, and we divided it into different areas based on forest, shrubland, and meadow. And then we also looked at the characteristics within those different groupings. So So you have some very mature forests that are very high quality. You also have some younger forests with different tree species. So we separated them out so that when we talk about how to manage it, you can see the different areas and understand where we're talking about to help with the guidance of the maintenance. We also used a GPS while we were out on site to see points of important features and issues such as vernal pools and areas of erosion, just so that when we reference them in the plan, you can actually have visual with where they might be. Next slide. So after we did the on-the-ground assessment and looked at these maps, we looked at all the natural features and tried to assess which were the most important for the site, which were your highest quality ones to protect and improve. And we looked at the mature forests, the water resources, and the serpentine barrens as really your most important conservation priorities. And these drive management with all the other features being secondary to care for and protect. Not that they're not important, but they don't rise to the same level. Next slide. So after looking at the priorities, we then came up with a list of recommendations. And these three were the most important that we landed on. So the first is invasive plant control. So invasive plants are typically exotic, non-native plants that are very aggressive. So it's not every exotic plant that comes through, but it's ones that outcompete our native species, which are typically better for wildlife, and they can outgrow them, and they can also damage existing plants. So if you look at the picture, to the left is a vine, and that's bittersweet. It's an invasive plant. And what it does, it can strangle trees that are younger. It can also grow into the canopy, and it makes the trees top heavy, susceptible to ice and wind damage. So it really can destroy your forest over time. So these are very important plants to control, to let the native plants grow and provide good wildlife habitat. It also adds to the scenic beauty because when you have very aggressive plants, you tend to get just a few dominating. Whereas if you have a nice mix of native plants, you can add a lot of beauty that way to the area. The second high priority recommendation is deer management. I'm sure as everyone knows, we have too many deer in this area. So in terms of your plant communities, the deer eat the native plants first. They didn't evolve with the invasive plants. They don't tend to go for them first. So what you have is all your oak trees, your hickory trees, they can't regrow. Any seedlings that try and sprout, the deer tend to eat them. So over time, you can lose your forests. You can lose all your good native shrubs, and what you get left with is just more of your invasive plants that, again, don't support wildlife habitat. On top of that, the deer, they're a vector for Lyme's disease. They can cause vehicular accidents. So all around, they're important to protect. Also, you have residential neighbors. They'll go into their yards, they'll eat all your landscaping. So it kind of helps to everyone in the region. And then speaking of development, the last is to minimize the impacts from the development. So when we were on site, we did see that there was a lot of sediment getting into the streams. So that's during construction, but also post-construction, there can continue to be impacts. For instance, there's stormwater basins with a lot of grass. It's, a prime place for a lot of geese to gather. When you have a lot of geese, you have a lot of geese fecal matter, and that overloads the streams with nutrients and degrades water quality. You can also have residents that maybe aren't quite as aware of boundaries as they should be. They might mow into the parklands, they might dump lawn debris. So it's something to keep an eye on over time because you do have this close connection to the residences right next to the park. On the flip side, that can be very beneficial. You have people who can connect strongly with the park, who can be kind of your eyes and ears on the site, but it's just making sure to try and balance the positives with potential negatives. Next slide, please. We did also include a host of other recommendations about how to care for the park. For instance, hazard tree mitigation is one that we typically include in all of our plans. This recommendation involves assessing all your trees to see if they're damaged, if they're dying in any way, and if so, if they fall, could they cause harm to a person, could they cause damage to a structure, and if so, addressing those needs. We also talk about pest control for spotted lanternfly, emerald ash borer, even touching on climate change adaptation, habitat restoration, and because of the location of the park, environmental education, and how you get that tie-in again for people connecting to the nature. So that's just a very brief overview of the recommendations included in the plan. They do get more detailed to give you more specific recommendations for how these can be carried out, and then all the recommendations are prioritized in a table and given a list of when during the year it's appropriate to address these, so that you actually have a plan going forward for how to manage the park. I'm going to turn it over to Gary now, though, who's going to talk a bit about the serpentine barrens, and then we can take any questions after.
Thanks, Gus.
As Kelsey said, my name is Gary Gimbert. I'm Director of Stewardship for Natural Lands. I don't know how many people are familiar with serpentine barrens. There's quite a few in the area. But it's a very unique ecosystem. The plants there have evolved to handle the heavy metals that are in the bedrock. And what's happened over time, if you could hit the next slide. The yellow area is what is right now about currently still what I consider pristine serpentine barrens. What's happened over time with invasive plants and just change in management, serpentine barrens need disturbance. So fire would have been a historic disturbance, grazing, and even human interference to keep the trees and the invasive plants out. What's happened over time is as those trees and invasive plants creep in, they drop their leaves, they create a duff layer that lets more invasive plants creep in, and then you see the serpentine habitat shrink up. I think this plan is from 2011, if I'm correct. The ecologist Scott Bush had done this, and the idea was to phase this in over about 5 years. If you could hit the next slide. And this would be the ultimate expansion of what we could get it back to looking at historic aerial photos. With the developers being on site with their heavy equipment, we talked with Casey and Scott Bush, the ecologist, and we're never going to get another chance to get use of that heavy equipment since it's already on site. And really what we're finding on the other serpentine barrens that we manage is that if you can scrape that duff layer off and expose that serpentine soil, you get less invasive plants, and the seed bank for the serpentine species is already there. You don't have to seed anything. It's been coming back all on its own. We've done 3 different scrapings, and we've been working within our preserve system. We've been working with the Academy of Natural Sciences out of Philly, and all the PhDs, the plant geeks are going crazy about what's coming in on those sites. So we'd like to transfer that to this site. And if you want to hit the next slide, where we're at right now is developers gone in with a piece of equipment and clearing out all the junk that's been in the understory. There's a lot of rose, a lot of autumn olive. On the one end of the property, there's at least an acre and a half of wisteria. So that's all been mowed down. Where we're at now is Scott Bush has marked about half of the trees that we want to keep. A lot of the trees are going out because we want more sunshine getting down to create more grasses and the wildflowers. So once the trees are marked, developer's going to go in and we're going to be removing those trees and getting all that material off of the site. We don't want that wood material spread out, and actually in the areas that won't receive the soil scraping, we're going to pull all that wood chips and debris out and to get rid of it off site. And then we're just going to keep working to define it, and then they're going to come in with their heavy equipment and they're going to scrape. I think if we go any deeper than 6 to 8 inches, it won't be worthwhile, but we'll remove all that soil, get it out of there off site, and let nature take its course and repopulate with those serpentine plants. Anybody questions?
And just as some education for the board, there are endangered plant species that are on this site.
Yes.
That will flourish once this is done, correct?
Yes.
Good. Okay.
Some questions from the board on the presentation? Okay, can you remind me overall what the strategy here is? Obviously there's work going on now as part of the whole development of the site. We're working with natural lands on this particular serpentine barrens aspect of it. We've got these recommendations on a management plan for the longer term care and attention on the property in the park.
Correct.
So how is that going to be managed? We've got a consulting relationship with natural lands, and we're going to manage this through a contractor, our own staff, bit of both. How's it going to work?
A little bit of both, but mostly natural lands. We've been talking to natural lands since 2007 about this when the conditional use was approved. We do not have the staff, the expertise, or the equipment to maintain 162 acres of this wild and very precious serpentine barrens. So I've been recommending, staff has been recommending for years to the various boards over the years to outsource this to Natural Lands. They have the expertise, we do not. And I wouldn't even consider taking this on as a job because it's incredibly complex and intricate. So it's the board's discretion what to do. We can discuss a multi-year management contract with Natural Lands to manage the park. And we can bring that forth to the board for discussion and possible approval in coming months. Rick, Dave, I don't see a lot of other work going on. I mean, the developer still has tons of work to do on the park itself, the trails, getting the other 2 dams done. So this is all on the developer right now to get this work done. So I think we should take advantage of it, but also keep working with Natural Lands to get into that consulting outsourced relationship and maybe strike a contract bargain to do that.
Do you have a rough idea of how much the maintenance would cost?
We've not gone that far. So we're working with Natural Lands to come up with an annual figure.
So Natural Lands, you've got a lot of volunteer work, volunteers who support the organization. I presume you've got a fairly limited total staff. So how would you manage a contractor that is responsible for managing this size of a park? You outsource to a third party that you would negotiate with, and with them contracting with you? How does it work?
Well, depending on the financials, I mean, we may hire a manager just for this site.
Okay.
Or it might be someone that works half the time at this site. We also have, many of our managers have what we call coordinator positions, which are areas of expertise. We have someone who, Darren Groff, who's our fire management coordinator. All of our staff, our stewardship staff, are certified wildland firefighters, and we have a prescribed burn crew, and we burn every spring. On this site, I know Darren has some concerns just with the airport and the highways close by. We probably wouldn't do anything over like an acre in size at any given time, but it is something we've contacted the airport. They're willing to work with us in the window we would need to burn to avoid any smoke issues with flights. So yeah, there's a number of different ways. I mean, we manage other sites, and I was going to mention if anybody wanted to go visit, we have serpentine barrens at Cheslin, at our Willis Brook Preserve. There's trails through them. I mean, or if you wanted to set up a official visit, I'd be happy to walk everybody out there and you can see some of these projects. But when we manage that, we also have work days where staff, all the managers will get together and work on one project in the barrens, and that way you can get a lot of bang for your buck out of 15 people showing up with chainsaws, chipper, etc., and move along.
Okay.
Can we set up one of these? I'd like to do that.
Yeah, we could.
Yep.
I've been to Cheslin 100 times, and it's gorgeous, and you'll see a finished serpentine, not finished, not that, but a more pristine serpentine than what's there.
That would be great.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and we kind of have the gamut from parts of the serpentine we're just starting to work on restoration to the areas that we've scraped and are looking really good.
Yeah, we can do that.
So,
I have a question. Can you expand a little bit on the deer management, and what do you mean by that?
well, I'll just speak to what our deer management program is. We have a controlled hunt where we have it on most of our preserves, where someone interested in getting on the preserve to hunt has to fill out an application. They go through a screening process. If we decide to bring them on, they're required to have certification in safety training, hunter safety, as well as if, like in this instance, if we're talking about this property with all the houses, I would say it would be an archery program. So there would have to be an archery safety test as well. We bring them in, they get familiar with the program, they're tested. If they can't handle the bow or the shotgun professionally, then they're out. We have rules that we put in place there. Right now we ask that they harvest the doe first, because if you're really trying to affect the deer population, you're never going to get 100% of the buck, and so you're going to leave one behind, and you're just going to have one really tired buck at the end of the breeding season. So we ask them to take a doe or put in at least 30 hours. They also help us in keeping unwarranted hunting. Folks who are trying to just sneak on, they're the ones you need to worry about.
Unwarranted hunting in a park next to Greystone?
Yeah, poachers.
You think that people would take their rifle into this park and kill
Maybe
them?
not their rifle, but they would take a crossbow or bow, I would bet.
There's been a history of poaching on the site with the caretaker, absolutely.
So is the deer management thing a one-time thing, or is this a every year sort of thing?
It's every year we post the property, let users know. We don't shut down the preserve. All of our hunters have to sign in every day, sign out, and we have them wear an orange armband so that everyone knows from a distance. You see that person wearing an orange armband, you know that person's part of our system. They've been through our testing, everything, and we have been doing this since 1994, and we have not had an incident.
I feel very uncomfortable having that take place near a school and a community. I understand that deer are overpopulating this area, but we also have to understand why the deer are overpopulating this area, and that's because of development. And that's because of all the choices that have been made for them in our area. So, I mean,
I'm not telling you this is just a recommendation on our part.
Right.
As well? Townships have handled this differently. Some have had their own staff do hunts and calls. Some have done professional sharpshooters who come in at night. Some they'll just do fencing and exclude sensitive areas, which everything has its pros and cons. But so there are different approaches you can take. If you do want to manage the hunt yourself, others have outsourced actual management of the hunt and brought in people. So it depends on what the comfort level of the township is. And even townships have talked about restricting it to certain hours of the day or certain weeks during the year or certain days, and they can, close down the park at certain times. So
but there's also people who haven't done hunts, right? There's sort of people who have not done controlled deer management.
There are, and it is an approach you can take. You just have to understand that your efforts to restore a native plant community will be hindered by that. Not saying that you can't choose that as an option, but you have to be realistic and understand that you're not going to make as much progress towards having a sustainable, healthy plant community that you could otherwise. And all of these are recommendations. There's nothing, as Barry was saying, there's nothing that says you have to do these. These are just our recommendations based on our experience at our preserves and working with other clients and townships.
If I could just say something on that. Every 2.5-year-old female deer, typically when impregnated, has 2 offspring. So what happens is the deer herd, unless it's culled properly, expands exponentially.
I understand the way that deer reproduce. That's not what I'm arguing. You don't need to explain that to me.
All right, so we thank you for the presentation. Is there any other questions for natural lands? You wanted some history comment here from you, or
if you want?
Well, let's hear it.
Okay, back 20 years ago, Bill Euster did a survey along with the group from Westchester University on the Barrens area, specifically that corner of Phoenixville, Pike, and the bypass. Adjacent to that, there's 26 or 27 acres that are owned by the North Hill Civic Association. The deer were really heavily populated in there. So there's 2 things that happened. First of all, Bill Euster got a survey and determined that there were 7 endangered plant species in there that were unique to the Barrens. That was the first thing. The second thing is that he helped encourage Charlie Jirakian and then Aaron to have the hunters come in, and that what the hunting group was a group specifically from the Westchester PD Police Department. I think there were 1 or 2 guys from West Goshen too, but it was predominantly Westchester, and there were a couple of firemen in there too. But it was a group that hunted the place on a regular basis. They when the Jirakians decided to go ahead with the development, they gave Dr. White, Doug's dad, who was a board member at the time, gave him about 120 acres as parkland. I then went to hearings, complained that, or pointed out, not complained, but pointed out that there were at least 30 additional acres that should be covered because of a circumstance situation. So we got that going. Then they started to do the development on Cherokee, so they did the final plans, etc. Hired a builder. That builder eventually changed, and then they went to big, but they had the guys go in and cull a herd at that point, and they really reduced the deer population. I live in North Hill, so I was regularly seeing deer in my backyard, ruining my garden. So when they finished, they took, I don't know, 40 or 50 deer out. I didn't see deer in my neighborhood until this last year. Last night I came home about 11 o'clock. There were 2 does and 3 fawns in my front yard helping me with my grass control. There you go. So, okay.
Anyway, this is something that I think the board's going to have to talk about, because I'm not going to vote for this. I'm not going to support this until we have. I know. I'm just saying. I'm saying I'm not going to agree to this until we have the conversation.
So there's plenty of aspects of the management plan we need to talk about, but is there any other questions about this approach that's been explained in terms of, having this park be one that's well managed and looked after with respect to the features that it has?
The only comment I had is that I had them add about 30 acres to the parklands that we're getting.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
That's
okay. Thanks very much.
All right, thank you.
So just to leave, so we're going to set up a time to get together with him for a tour, right?
We're going to set up a site visit.
Okay.
Pride of Chesnut at this point, great location, and then what I'm going to do, work with staff and talk with you guys on getting maybe a model agreement for maintenance.
Yeah, pretty proposal. Okay.
Absolutely.
Good.
Okay. Thanks very much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
May I ask a quick question?
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Now, you're the same as the Natural Lands Trust, correct?
Yes.
Please take a moment to just tell the audience exactly who you are. Are you a company? Are you a nonprofit? And is your business just to manage all these lands?
So we are an environmental nonprofit. We are primarily focused in southeastern PA and going to southern New Jersey. As I mentioned, we have 3 different parts of our organization mentioned. So we have protecting land. So we will preserve land that we own and hold. We will help counties, townships, and the state protect land. We also care for nature, so we steward our own properties. But we also have municipal services, and where we will work with townships and counties to, again, do stewardship plans or municipal zoning. And then we do a lot of volunteer work and education and outreach and events with our preserves.
Did you come in and do this as a service that the township paid for, or was this a complimentary?
So this is part of the larger contract to do the stewardship plan. It covers everything from our site visits to plan writing, mapping, meetings like this, and then further revision of the plan with comments from the supervisor.
So up until this point, this plan seems very thorough and phenomenal and impressive. The township has not paid you for this part yet, or have we?
I'm not sure how billing set up.
I thought billing was, Casey, was it time and material for this?
Yeah, it was time and materials, and the board approved this, I think,
This
last
has been
year.
part of our budget last year, and we approved the expenditure as something we were going to expected to have this kind of service in 2021.
Okay, no, I just don't recall it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks again, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
My question was this.
Okay, let's move on to agenda item number 8, discussion of the draft ordinance for a plastic bag ban in West Goshen Township. And just as way of introduction to Kristen, the board authorized the solicitor's office to prepare a draft ordinance on plastic bag and plastic straw regulations
at the board meeting on August 17th. And in the board packet on the website was the draft ordinance that has been produced by Kristen and the team. So Kristen, you want to just explain where we are with this?
I mean, I brought it up to the Borough of Westchester. There are some, obviously policy decisions in terms of when you want to implement it, what thickness of bags can be permitted, whether you're going to include straws and bags, who's going to be in charge of enforcement, whether you are allowing exemptions. I put in here the Sustainability Committee would be able to handle exemption requests. So again, there are some policy decisions. Everybody has to do it, make it their own, so to speak. So I don't know, after our census is done, I don't know if this was looked at by our Sustainability Committee. I don't know where it went from after the census. So I would answer your question, but I mean, there are still some policy discussion or decisions that.
So tonight we're going to be discussing those open items, as you said, as a board, trying to resolve them, and then deciding if we've got it at a point that it's that we could move it forward for a vote for adoption.
Yeah, I mean, I think a key thing is and something that the Borough of Westchester did, and it obviously took longer because of the state law that was enacted that banned these bans, so to speak. That went into the ban, the state legislation that prohibited these local municipalities from enforcing these bans was in effect until July 1st or until the governor's declaration got extended again because of the COVID governor's declaration. So that law is no longer in effect. From what I understand, there's nothing in the horizon as far as legislation, but I can't say that for sure. Something could come up, and then you'd be faced with whether or not, I think at that point in time, we'd have to come back and decide whether you want to continue to implement it. The litigation that the City of Philadelphia and the Borough of Westchester are involved with is we've asked for the court for a a stay until right now there's no sense going forward with the litigation because the law is no longer in effect. So if the legislature was to enact another ban, then we would take that, remove the stay, and we'd go forward with the litigation, which basically ask the court to declare whether the state legislature can impose such restrictions. But right now you don't have to worry about that, so you could go forward. I think the implementation of it is really important because I know, like in Borough of Westchester, they're still continuing an education component of it. Having an outreach to businesses and restaurants that are impacted by it, so there's proper planning, and it's not just like, and I'm not suggesting you were going to do this, but it's not like you pass it 1 month and the next month, boom, you have to.
No, but when is the when is the boroughs going into full effect? It's like April?
I'm not certain. I know they decided on it, but I don't go to the meetings.
I think Philadelphia is April.
Yeah, well, I was looking at my notes from when we had that woman. October 1st, prohibition starts. They'll only get warnings, no fines. In April 2022, the city will fully enforce the ban. That was in the city of Philadelphia. I think the borough is probably, I want to say January.
It's earlier.
I want to say January. Yeah.
It is January 22?
I believe so.
And
I can find out tomorrow and send you guys all an email. Don't have that information.
Has the Sustainability Committee reviewed the draft and had a chance to provide any comments yet?
Yes, they have, and there's three members here tonight. If you had any questions for them, we have Melanie, Henry, and Tina Marie Smith.
Very good. So I'm just going to ask a quick question to Chris, and then we'll ask the board to provide their comments or thoughts on some of the parameters and issues that Kristen described. So Kristen, sometimes when we do an ordinance, you say, it's good to have the ordinance, but have certain parameters in a resolution so that it can be changed without having to redo the whole ordinance. Is there any applicability of that approach here? So for example, we could have an ordinance that then had a resolution that specified the thickness of the plastic bag in case we needed to be flexible and change that, one way or another. Is there any benefit to that approach versus we decide some things now and then it goes into effect and then within 2 or 3 months we're coming back and having to change a couple of things?
I mean, I would only say that if it's something that you think there's going to be significant, there's a likelihood that things are going to change. I mean, I don't know if that's the case in this regard.
Okay, I just thought one of those questions.
Well, to answer your question, Sean, and Henry will probably speak to this because he looked over the ordinance and brought up a really good question. about the thickness of the bags and the fact that I think some townships or cities are trying to avoid, businesses are trying to avoid that. And actually I had reached out to Christine Knapp and Philadelphia is amending their ordinance to totally strike the thickness requirement.
Okay.
So, Henry, do you want to add to that?
Yes, I'd be happy to. Let me just.
Does the board mind if Henry speaks to us right
it's a
now?
good point. I want to understand it.
I wrote something up. Good evening, Henry Alexander. I live at 1101 Fern Hill Road and am a member of the Sustainability Advisory Committee. The following are comments regarding the proposed West Goshen Township plastic bag and plastic straw regulations. I strongly support the adoption of this ordinance for all the reasons listed in the findings in the ordinance. The ordinance will reduce litter, solid waste, greenhouse gases, and harm to wildlife. I recommend one revision to the proposed ordinance to clarify the definition of single-use plastic carry-out bag. These bags are defined basically as plastic bags that are provided to the customer at the point of sale, with some exemptions. The definition specifically exempts reusable bags that are specifically designed and manufactured for multiple use. Another exemption is for plastic bags with a thickness of 4 mils or greater. This second exemption, specifying the thickness of the bag, is not needed, and it could provide an incentive to circumvent the ordinance by using thicker bags. Single-use bags can be easily differentiated from reusable bags, which are usually made of reinforced plastic panels that are stitched together and have handles. I recommend that the last sentence of the definition of a compliant bag, which states, if the bag is made of plastic, it must be a minimum of 4 mils thick, be removed from the proposed ordinance. So, if you have any questions concerning that, I'm happy to answer it, but that's what I came up with.
Thank you, Henry. Appreciate it. So let's go around the board here and see what questions you have, or ask some of the questions that Krista posed that are still in her mind, a board decision that needs to be made on the draft ordinance as it stands. So this time we'll start over here with Robin. Any specific questions or comments about some of the parameters?
I can't speak to it in detail. I just would like to say thank you guys for putting it together. Because it seems like it's covered everything that we wanted to address, especially plastic bags. And Henry, I just wanted to ask you about the different, what you shared about in terms of the 4 millimeter. Is that what it is?
The 4 mil bags.
And that's a much thicker bag, correct?
It's a much thicker bag. There probably no one's going to go in that direction, trying to provide a single-use 4 mil bag. So it's just not an issue.
Okay, so you don't have to consider that.
Right.
Okay.
Do you have any questions?
I do. The first one is paragraph 4 on page 3. It says they're not readily recyclable, and yet I take mine back to ShopRite every week, and they have a place there to put your recycled bags. So I don't believe that. The second one is that numerous studies in paragraph 6 are referred to, but I have yet to see one of those studies. I'd like to be able to see one, or at least one.
I can send you one tonight. I can send you one tonight.
Do you have some?
Yes, many.
Great.
So
those are my comments.
Okay. So on the first point, I hate to dissuade you of the fact you're recycling, but the bottom line, unfortunately, is this applies to everything we put in there that's glucose. But the plastic we put in there, only about 17% of it truly gets recycled. The rest is either incinerated or landfill. The reality is it goes to a sorting facility. Only the most pristine, clean, plastic actually has a chance to be recycled. The rest of it is off to landfill or incineration. And that goes to the plastic bags and put in those bins of like giant. Because they're contaminated with food waste and other things. They're just not virgin enough to go through. And the cost effectiveness, unfortunately, making a plastic bag out of oil is much cheaper than trying to recycle contaminated plastic. So, then we feel good doing it, but you're wasting your time other than the 17% that does get recycled. Okay, any other questions to you?
No.
So I had a couple of questions on the ordinance. So we have in there that we would, if the Commonwealth if the commercial establishment provides a compliant bag, they shall charge a fee. So we're kind of mandating a fee for providing a compliant bag.
Yeah, you can do that, but you also don't have to.
I don't think we should include that. So this is on page 6, 61.5, verse 61.5a. I propose we don't include that.
The whole section, 61.5.
I don't see, if you take the first bit out, I don't see why B would be relevant on its
Yeah,
own.
you wouldn't need it.
My next question is to do with violations. So I'd just like to understand what would constitute a violation. So if this is in effect and a establishment is using paper bags, is a violation the fact that you were found providing the plastic bags that are not acceptable? And that's the one violation. Is it a violation for every day that you do it or before you
Every time you provide somebody with a plastic bag, it's a violation, quite honestly.
But how would you, how could someone on inspection go and say, you've got,
Well, you have to be reasonable in how you enforce it.
Yeah, so is...
You would find out that if a company is continuing to use plastic bags, and you send one notice, it's like you send one notice. I mean, it's like no different than a zoning violation, where it's a continuing violation for every day. You don't send them because it goes on for 24 hours. You don't keep citing them for it's a one-day thing.
So just the violation would be that you were found using, providing plastic bags.
Continuing to provide plastic bags.
So if you went back the next day, you're still doing it, that's the second violation.
That's
Okay, so it's kind of like a as per inspection violation. Okay, and we feel we don't need any clarification on that.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I mean, again, any law, there's subject to how it's interpreted by the code enforcement officer, and there has to be rational and reasonable interpretation.
Yeah.
It's not ridiculous. Again, the goal is not to get fines, the goal is to get fines.
Right. And the only other thing is, I'm less familiar with alternatives to straws, plastic straws. So did the Sustainability Committee have a dialogue around any establishment using plastic straws, what alternatives they have, and is there an alternative that they can easily transition to, or is this going to be harder than a plastic bag?
Well, I think I can answer your question. First of all, straws are not necessary for drinking many beverages in restaurants, but if people do prefer to have a straw, there are alternatives. There's metal straws that are washable that restaurants can invest in to provide their customers, and there's also straws made out of recycled materials like cardboard and also cane sugar. So yes, there are many alternatives.
And Starbucks is using, in a lot of their drinks, the way the lid is now is, it avoids the need for having a straw. So they've changed their lid on a lot of their drinks so that it's hold the lid is.
Very good. Thank you. Anyone else with questions?
I just had one comment, or I wanted to have a little bit of a discussion about it, but I think that $100 fine is probably too little. I think Philadelphia, when they were here, they were doing.
Yeah, but actually, you're bound by the Second Township Code, and you're limited in your, if it's a summary criminal matter, you're bound by what the code allows you to impose as your fines. I'm pretty sure it's 100 to 100 is minimum, 1,000 times.
Okay, but we could start with 1,000? Is that what you're saying, or does it have to incrementally?
The district justice will set that fine when we issue the citation.
Okay.
Once it goes to district court. So Bill's been there a dozen times in the last couple of months.
Yeah, our DJ is trying to think of the right. He doesn't tolerate nonsense. So
yes, exactly.
He generally starts the fines right about the middle, right at the middle level. I've seen fines for noise violations, $500 plus court costs.
Okay, so I'm standing corrected here, I'm sorry, I wondered, that's why I always bring this book. So it's section 1601 of the Second Class Code. This would be enforced as a summary criminal offense. And it says that the Board of Supervisors may prescribe criminal fines not to exceed $1,000 per violation. So that is your maximum. But as far as your minimum, you can establish what you want that to be.
And if I may, most of our non-traffic citations for code violations, the minimum is 100 and to a maximum of 1,000. So, and I can always ask the district justice to levy a certain level, but with this new DJ, I don't have to ask.
I mean, you can take it all out, Ashley, and just say not to exceed $1,000 if you want, and let the district justice hear the facts and understand it, and use his, let that be his job. We don't have to specify the 100 for the first. I mean, I think again, the thought process in drafting it that way was that if you're going to do a great education program and you give them enough sufficient time to clear out their plastic bags and be prepared to comply with the ordinance, you probably don't need that 100 and then 200, whatever. It's a little bit different. But if you weren't going to do that, you wouldn't want to just all of a sudden, okay, now we're going to give you $1,000 fine. So.
Okay, I guess the reason that I brought it up is because I think Philadelphia is doing that. I believe in her presentation they had a pretty hefty fine on first offense. And so, this district justice isn't going to be there forever, and so I would kind of like to have it as a policy. But I think that the higher we set it, the less that businesses are going to try and get around it, or just give out bags anyway, even just to make a point.
So I go back to the idea that this is about trying to get compliance, right? And if they will, whoever it is who's enforcing this could be there every day giving them a violation, and if every day that's violating it, and we have it here, we change this to be a fine not less than $500 and not more than $1,000 per violation. That's $500 to $1,000 a day, and we can expect as frequently as we like. So I think we have some language. So I think we should change this. Be a fine 500. Yeah.
Minimum of 500.
Minimum 500.
And
that would be relevant. Those
I
are my
have some
questions.
questions
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, what is the time frame between the date that the ban would become in effect and when the ordinance would be adopted by the township?
You mean the other way
How long of a period of
The other
time
way
are we
around.
talking about for the education period?
That's up to you guys.
Exactly.
So an ordinance by law, by the Second Class Code, unless you state otherwise, is effective 5 days after adoption.
Right.
So if you want it to go into effect 5 days after you adopt it, that's what will happen unless you state otherwise.
Right. So what would be the maximum, or let me put it like this, in Westchester Borough, when they enacted the ordinance, of course, they were kind of tabled because of the act limiting the ban. But how long of a period was it between when they announced the ban would start and when it would become effective?
The date they adopted it, they knew the state law was already in effect.
Right.
They adopted it knowing that the state law banned them to do it. And so they basically said, we'll wait and see what happens with the litigation and with what happens with the ban.
So we don't know when that ban is actually going to
I
effect.
don't recall the exact conversations, but I think it was probably going to be a 6-month education period.
6 months?
And it is January 1 that it's going into effect, 22.
I'd like to hear from the Sustainability Advisory Committee. I'm sure they've reviewed this. I know from Alexander they have. What are the plans for educating the public about this being put into effect? And also, along with that, what collaboration will it be with the Chamber of Commerce to comply with this ban that we're considering here?
Well, our next meeting is next week, and on the agenda will be how to educate the public, how to engage the public, physically going out to grocery stores and other retail shops to basically get the word out there that this is going to happen, assuming that it's adopted. So that's on the agenda for next week.
Right. So I just would emphasize, I think it's very critical. We would encourage compliance here, not for people to start pushing back and fighting back against this. So if we can win folks over about the importance of this banning of plastic bags, then that would make it the most effective way for this to be accomplished. And that, I just want to emphasize, the Chamber of Commerce is going to be a key player in this. Now I'd like to hear about how they're going to be integrated with any education efforts and collaboration efforts from the township as we move forward with this.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. So stay tuned.
So we need some time. I mean, it sounds like we need, Bill, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I mean, what we did with the rental program was that was at least a 4-month education period between when we adopted it and when we enacted it. So one piece of one thing we did for the educational aspect for that was we held stakeholder meetings. So we physically had during the day, all of the apartment complexes were invited to come here to have a meeting. We went through the ordinance and what was expected, how the inspection process would take place. So I think stakeholder meetings would be huge with the business community. And then we held another meeting that was available to any other rental property owners that they could come in and be educated as well.
And the township is a member of the Westchester Chamber of Commerce, so we already have relationships with the leadership, so that would not be a hard thing to do to get those meetings good.
And some of our businesses already have to deal with this in other places. Like
Yeah.
Wawa's dealing with it in New Jersey.
And Delaware.
And in Delaware, and Acme deals with it in New Jersey.
And Starbucks with the straws.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think the biggest, who you're gonna have to educate the most is your mom and pop.
Yeah,
The pizza shop, the Chinese place.
Chinese, those kind of places. Mishi Sushi.
Right, and let's not forget too, we put out a survey months ago, kind of gauging public interest in this, and there was a majority of the township that voted in favor of banning plastic bags. And so I think when we saw the feedback and we put it out there, that's also what propelled this to go forward. Now, it is an education campaign for shoppers and for business owners. It's going to take months, but the sooner that we can adopt the ordinance, the sooner we can get to work working with people, getting it out in our newsletter, like Melanie said, going to the different businesses, working with them, having those meetings, which I think are really important, Bill, here, so that we can talk to people and get them ready for the transition. But honestly, they're plastic bags. And like Christine said when she was here speaking, they are not required. They're optional. So I think the sooner we can do this, the better.
Kristen, if we want to advertise this for adoption, do we have to have an effective date already in the ordinance, or we do, right? So really we need the board to kind of at least agree today, if we're going to have a motion to approve to move this forward, we need to agree what that effective date would be. So actually, would you like to suggest, a March 1st or?
Well, I think that since Philadelphia is shooting for April, we might learn something going by that timeline. We might also shoot for something like Earth Day and make it a sustainability event. What does the sustainability committee feel about that?
I agree. I think that's a good idea. My only concern is if the law changes again, if that's going to influence this and moving forward.
Well, if the law changes, then would our ordinance be moved anyway?
We can't assess that till we see what the law is, so I think you don't worry about that. I think right now, the law is there is no ban.
Yeah, and there's no intelligence out there that anybody's working on another statewide ban, so.
I think if we can say Earth Day, it's a good target because it's in April and it's something that people will remember.
And it's a highly visible day and likely to attract more people.
Right.
Okay. So are the board in support of, asking Kristen to use the effective date as being whatever Earth Day is, date-wise?
I would prefer to see, give us a 6-month period after July the 1st of 2022.
Okay, so that's the second suggestion. What about Robin, your thoughts?
I like the idea of marrying it up with Earth Day.
April 22nd,
absolutely.
2022.
It's going to get their attention much more than waiting till July when they go on vacation.
If you were to vote for this, what would you want as the date for it? Do you think 6 months is reasonable?
2050.
Okay. So I'm with Robin and Ashley. I think John. So we have 3 board members that support Earth Day. Kristen, if you don't mind.
Yeah, that's fine. I just want to make sure, is everybody comfortable with the other edits? So on page 4, we're doing what Mr. Alexander suggested, getting rid of the last sentence,
Yes.
paragraph B. We are adding the effective dates. Sean, is everybody comfortable with Sean's suggestion to eliminate the entire section 61-5 at the top of page 6? And as far as the enforcement, changing it to be minimum fine of 500, maximum 1,000. This change we're making?
Yes.
Okay. Sure. Advertising it for the motion.
Yeah, so I need a motion to advertise the ordinance with the changes Kristen just described for adoption at a public hearing. I just want to make the motion.
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Ashley. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Robin.
October 19th, was that prospective date you wanted to get this adopted? That's our next regular meeting?
Yes, I won't be here for that.
Sure, so the public hearing would be on the 19th,
Sure.
and then we could adopt.
This doesn't have to go for zoning. If you wanted to, you could adopt this on the 5th of October. If Sean, if you wanted to be here for it.
Yeah, let's do it on the 5th.
Okay.
You want to do it on the 5th?
Yeah,
Sure.
but I won't be here on the 19th.
Okay, that's fine.
So we have a motion and a second. Any other board comments or questions on the motion or the ordinance? Are there any public comments or questions? Doug?
Will this proposal affect medical and dental offices for using these bags for infection control?
I don't think
I use a
I
lot of
don't
plastic
believe
bags.
so. It mentions commercial establishments, it says the exemption process, it mentions other exclusions.
So are medical and dental offices exempt for infection control purposes?
It doesn't say that in here, it doesn't say exactly that. I mean, are you giving
Like a
client
Are you selling
a plastic
hair
bag with a
products?
toothbrush in it for them to take home? Are you one of those guys?
You're not going to be
There's
covered.
sometimes they're prepackaged, but I cover all my equipment in all kinds of places.
No, that's
not
nothing
it.
to do with
You're
this.
not defined as a commercial establishment in this.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So you can, I guess you can still give the toothpaste and toothbrush in a plastic
Tiny
bag.
plastic bag.
Okay, any other questions? All right, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. The motion passes 4-1. Thank you.
And thank you to the Sustainability
Yeah, thank
Committee
you
for
very
being,
much.
for being here tonight, but also just being great about this. You guys did a lot of work.
You got some work ahead of you, though. Agenda item number 9, discussion and possible approval of Resolution 14, 2021, approving the 2022 Township Pension Plan's minimum municipal obligation. Casey?
Sure. This is our annual resolution to establish the financial requirements and also the minimum municipal obligation for the 2022 budgets. What I typically do is read the financial requirements and then the minimum municipal obligation for each of the plans. So for the administrative and roads employees pension plan, we have financial requirements of $740,279 and a minimum municipal obligation of $591,264. For the sewer employees pension plan, financial requirements of $275,529 and a minimum municipal obligation of $209,510. And finally, for the police pension plan, financial requirements of $672,404 and a minimum municipal obligation of $241,367.
In case, just a reminder, just between a financial requirement and the minimum municipal obligation, is that the employee contributions?
Correct. It's a mix of employee contributions and also the state aid we receive. Yep. For example, each police officer that serves with West Goshen gets 2 units of state aid. That state aid fluctuates on a yearly basis from the Commonwealth. And we typically don't even get that number until October, November, that we know what the state aid amount's going to be. So it's a mix of employee contributions and state aid.
Thank you, Keith. You has made a motion to adopt this resolution. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Robin. Are there any board questions or comments on the resolution? Are there any public comments or questions?
have a couple questions. I just was able to pull up the figures. And can you just explain also, clarify, so minimum municipal obligation, is that what's coming out of the general fund? Is that the requirement?
No, the minimum municipal obligation is the bare minimum amount that the township needs to provide to the pension funds. Some pension plans, I'm not going to name names around us, they've only contributed the minimum municipal obligation on a yearly basis. That's when you get into that decreased funding level, whereas the West Goshen Township's done a very good job of funding. We fund to the financial requirements as opposed to that minimum. So each of those, administrative roads and sewer employees pension plan, I'm sorry, strike that. Administrative roads and police pension plan comes out of the general fund, and the sewer employees pension plan comes out of the sewer operating fund.
Okay, so in next year's budget though,
Yep.
the line item for pension, is that figure on this sheet? And which figure is that?
We typically put in the financial requirements. Because again, that's a budgetary decision by the board during budget to fund that 100%.
So I've always been looking at the municipal or minimum municipal obligation, but I should be looking at the financial requirements as the line item that goes in the budget.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Correct.
One last thing. How does that compare to what was in this year's budget?
Sure, I have those figures. There was a market decrease in the total MMO for next year. It's actually almost 41% less than this year for next year, and that's solely due to the incredible stock market gains we've had in our pension funds through Vanguard and our very, very astute pension committee with their contributions to the pension funds. So this year it was the MMO was $1,760,787. This year it's $1,042,000, so a difference of almost $720,000, solely based on contributions also, and the significant stock market gains that we've had in our pension plan.
It's based on valuations of the investments as of
last December
31st, 2020.
Exactly.
Yeah. In terms of 22 contributions.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions, Margie?
No, thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, and we're ready to take a vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you. Item number 10, discussion and possible approval of Resolution 15/2021, establishing a 35-mile-per-hour speed limit on the North 5 Points Road from Community Park to Paoli Pike. Rick.
First of all, that description is incorrect. It's from Community Park Driveway to Ward Avenue.
Yeah, I apologize.
This was recommended by the Traffic Safety Unit because that 25-mile-an-hour area is not a residential district.
Yep.
It's a commercial district, which is more appropriate for a 35-mile-an-hour speed limit. Plus, I believe the Traffic Safety Unit's having issues with enforcement on that because nobody goes 25 miles an hour in that commercial zone.
I do.
Well, very few people.
follow the law.
The 85th percentile speed is significantly higher than 25 miles an hour. So it is a commercial zone. There's really no need to have a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit there. So the recommendation from the Traffic Safety Unit was to increase it to 35. I agree with that. So the resolution was prepared for consideration.
Is the Community Park driveway considered the intersection up here, or is it a little further down? So we should go up.
It's past Fern Hill Road.
Yeah, it's
Past
just
Fern
past the
Hill,
signal.
just past it from that point.
Yes.
Okay.
And that was at the request of the Public Works Department because they don't want to increase until past the driveway where all their trucks are going in and out.
Okay.
It was a reasonable accommodation.
Thank you. Hugh has made a motion for us to adopt Resolution 15/2021 with the clarification is for the Community Park driveway to Ward Avenue.
I'll second.
Thank you, John. You have a motion and a second. Are there any other board comments or questions? Any public comments or questions? Doug?
Is there a chance that kids at the park could run into the street as part of right north of the maintenance driveway? Could that be a problem?
Children shouldn't be in the maintenance facility
Well,
area.
Right, but well, you might have some north of that. Maybe some kids are playing ball or something.
That area is not commonly occupied by kids playing, and it's not in close proximity to the walking trail, so.
And it's private property, commercial property.
Correct.
There, so.
I don't think there's much chance of that happening.
Well, thank you for your question.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Any other questions? If you have a motion and a second, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion passes 5-0. Agenda item number 11, discussion and possible approval to vacate a portion of South Concord Road and agreement to extinguish the right-of-way for the Big Bear Gulch residential subdivision project.
He wasn't going 25.
Sean, I can
I'm sorry.
I can explain these.
Thank you. Please go ahead, Chris.
Two items that are follow-up items from the board's approval of the final subdivision plan for 504 South Concord Road. The plan requires, and I was looking at the plan myself, the property abuts South Concord Road, and a portion of that road, I guess, is being, it's not used today, right? It ends in a cul-de-sac at dead end. It's not used by the cemetery either, and so their plan contemplated, I'm happy to pass this along if you guys want to see it, but the part that's crosshatched was proposed to be vacated. So it was an obligation of the developer to see that that part of the road got vacated. The second-class township code has two ways for second-class township to vacate a road. One is by ordinance, the second is by agreement of the affected landowners. The affected landowners are those that abut the portion of the road to be vacated. So we asked the developer to get in touch with the property owner on the other side, which was the cemetery, and enter the agreement to allow that road to be vacated. I have the original agreement in my possession that is signed by the developer of the 504 South Concord Road property, and then also the abutting property owner on the other side. It just needs to be approved by the township. If you approve it, that road will no longer be a public road. It will revert from the center line of what was the public road to the adjacent property owners, and it'll become their land. We will have to record this document in the recorder of deeds, so it is no longer a public road. Basically, it's effectuating what the plan required them to do.
And in addition, the developer would be required to remove that paved surface and replace it with grass. There would be a permanent barricade directed at the end of the roadway section, just past the driveway to the cemetery.
So they have to remove all the asphalt and sublayer, or what did they just do? Just take the asphalt off and put soil over the top, seed it?
Yeah, it'll be grass.
And what will the barrier look like?
It's going to be a PennDOT standard Type 3 barricade for this exact type of situation. And that's on the approved land development plan.
Okay. And that's slightly north of the entrance into this new 6-home development.
Correct.
You just made the motion to adopt. Is there a second?
No, second.
Thank you, John. Are there any board questions on what is being proposed? Are there any public comments or questions? Okay. Doug?
Is there any negative side to doing this? Is it just procedural?
It's part of the development plan. It's a road that's not being used, and it's road to nowhere, really.
Yeah, there's no point in maintaining a road that isn't used by anybody other than people who probably shouldn't be there.
Right.
Well, we wanted it out of grass though, Robert. Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion passes 5-0.
And the second part of that is there was a sewer right-of-way that had been previously granted to the township before the sewer authority was in existence, and that sewer right-of-way was whatever's there today is being extinguished, and a new sewer right-of-way is being created. So the agreement for the township, because the agreement, sewer easement was originally in the name of the township, so the township has to agree to extinguish that existing sewer easement. The new sewer easement will be in the name of the authority. So this is just an agreement to extinguish an existing township sewer right away. You don't need it anymore. Their plan is contemplating a new easement for sewer. So this has been already approved by the sewer authority. It just needs you now to agree to it as well.
Okay, do we have a motion to approve the agreement to extinguish the existing right-of-way agreement? No, you didn't. You didn't want to. So we just voted on the vacation of the portion of the road. You're making that motion?
Yes.
Thank you, Hugh. Is there a second to Hugh's motion to extinguish the final right-of-way agreement?
Yeah, I'll go next.
Thank you, Ashley. Are there any board questions or comments about this motion or this agreement? Are there any public comments or questions? No. Okay, ready to take a vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen. Agenda item number 12, discussion of possible approval of TE-160 for a revised traffic signal at Paoli Pike and Turner Lane for Stanbury LLC. Rick.
Yeah, this is an application to modify an existing traffic signal at Turner Lane and Paoli Pike to accommodate the proposed development of Stanbury. Even though that hasn't been approved yet, part of the things that they have to do in the process of getting approval is get permits from PennDOT to do whatever needs to be improved. And this traffic signal application is one of those things. The ironic thing is the township has to apply for it because it's our traffic signal. So it's for their benefit. They're going to do the work once it's approved, but we have to apply for the permit modification to allow it to be done, and that's what this application does.
What are they going to?
They're going to add ADA curb ramps, LED latching, push buttons, and pedestrian signals with countdown hand-man timers to the crossings of the north, east, and west legs of the intersection.
Yeah, it's essentially going to bring the intersection up to current.
Right now it's not up to current PennDOT standards for pedestrian access, so this will enhance it and bring it up to current standards.
So I was confused because I wasn't, I didn't know who the applicant was, so it's us on their behalf. So we still own and maintain that intersection.
Correct.
We're mandated by.
But they'll have to pay to have the work done.
Yes.
But
Right,
we
but we
will
still-
retain ownership of the improvements.
In regard to you, the permittee then under the permit that the PennDOT issues for this?
For the traffic signal only, yes.
And what happens if the plan ultimately doesn't get approved? What happens to this?
Then it doesn't get built.
Okay.
Yeah, we're under no mandate to do.
We're under no obligation to do it ourselves. It's a part of this project.
Okay, you just made a motion to approve this application for traffic signal improvement. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, John. Any board questions or comments on it? Are there any public comments or questions? Doug?
Sean, what is the cost to the township for just this application?
Cost of the application?
Question?
Is there a cost to this application?
No cost.
Just our time to do this tonight. Review it.
No cost. Any other questions? Get ready to take a vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you. Item number 13, discussion of the potential use of the ARPA, American Rescue Act funds for 2022 stormwater projects construction. So as Casey's advisors, and I believe it's in the Treasurer's report this month, you can see that we now have a deposit of federal funds to the benefit of Township. It's in the Treasurer's report under American Rescue Plan. Actually earned $58 of interest on it.
Shocking.
Yeah, so we have 1.2 million basically in there.
Yeah, then we get to keep the interest. So.
We get to keep the interest, that's good. So, as the board may recall, at our last meeting, we had a presentation
from Dave and Rick around the priority stormwater projects that needed addressing in the 2022 calendar year. There were 3 projects that the board approved the expenditure of engineering design money this year to be ready to go out for public bid early in 2022 to execute those projects. As part of the discussion, we kind of talked about the likely construction costs for the 3 projects, and it was definitely over $1 million between the 3 of them. And I would like to suggest to the board that tonight we consider approving earmarking the ARPA funds that we've received to be used to pay for the construction of those 3 projects. And that therefore, in the preparation of the budget, that would be the source of funds for those projects, and they would not come from capital reserve fund or any transfer from the general fund into the capital reserve fund.
Are you making a motion to that effect?
I'm suggesting it as a discussion item. I'd like to hear your thoughts on it. If there's general agreement that's the right way to go, then I would ask for a motion to do that.
I'd like to just speak on that. From our August 17th meeting, we approved funds for the engineering firm to come up with some design plans for the Baltimore Street culvert, Glen Avenue Stormwater Piping Project, and the Legion Drive and North New Street. And looking at the estimated cost there, it's $500,000 for Baltimore, it's $400,000 for Glen, and $350,000 for Legion Drive. That would utilize that $1.2 million right there. So I would certainly support it, or I would make the motion that we earmark those funds for those 3 projects.
Any other board member disagree with the use of the funds for these stormwater projects in line with the required use of these funds for infrastructure in general? Any other projects you believe should consider the use of these funds?
Well, I just wanted to note that they are able to be used for sewer as well.
Mm-hmm. And there is a formal request from the sewer authority coming shortly for funding the continuing capital investments that we did at the last meeting.
And so are you saying that would come for the second wave of money that we've used?
I would say it would come from the consideration of what we've been doing for the last 2 years, which is to transfer funds from the sewer fund, which is where the sewer fees are deposited to pay for the operating costs. And if the board decides to take the sewer increase, the accumulation of those funds would be used to pay for the authority's capital needs through a transfer from the sewer fund. And therefore, they would not need to use the ARPA funds for the sewer projects. Okay, so Hugh, you made a motion, I believe, or you're considering making a motion? Or John did?
I made a motion. Considering it.
So John's made a motion. Okay, so a motion and a second. Are there any other board comments or questions about the use of these funds for the stormwater project construction phase? Are there any public comments or questions? Margie?
Yes, I think it's a good use of those funds. And can you just explain, though, however, why the Baltimore Street project, some of that expenditure can't be passed on to Amazon or whoever's developing that property?
Because they're in the borough.
That project's fully in the borough. There's no legal right for us to ask for anything from that developer.
Yeah, I just recall hearing that. It sounded as if the reason we're doing it was precisely because of that potential, that upcoming development.
Yeah, we want to be proactive so we don't.
It needs to be done, so
no matter what. So.
Before we're dealing with another couple hundred trucks, let's get it done while we only have to deal with Sardimer and Dewey Pile.
Does Dewey Pile, have they been notified? Do they know it's coming?
Rick's had some minor conversations.
I've had contact with our contact at Dewey Pile, yes, they're aware of it.
Doug, you have a question?
I'm okay with it as long as they're the highest priority.
Okay. All right, so we have a motion to approve the use of the ALPA funds for the 3 projects: Baltimore Street Culvert Project, Glen Avenue Pipe Project, Legion Drive Pipe Project. And we have a second. So, ready to take a vote? All in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay.
Motion passes 5-0. Reports for the month of August 2021. Number 14A, police report from Chief Michael Carroll.
Thank you. Report from the police department for August of 2021, we responded to 1,992 calls for service. Of those, 61 were alarms and 3 of those alarms were valid. We responded to 56 accidents. 15 of those accidents were reportable accidents. We drove a total of 17,885 miles. Conducted traffic enforcement, specified traffic enforcement at Rose Lane, South New Street, and Grove Road, South 5 Points, South Concord, and Pennsylvania Avenue, Rosary Lane, Spruce Avenue, and North New Street. And some of the training officers went through this month for their normal monthly Lexapol daily training bulletins, PA virtual network, which is our required training through the state. Officer Manko and Officer Virgilio completed the NRA firearms instructor certification. Sergeant Holman completed Host Negotiations 3 course. Officers Ash and Spigarelli completed TASER instructor courses. Detective Edwards and Officer Riley completed the Train the Trainer for a solo response to an active shooter. Our clerk, both clerks completed criminal law records for personnel, criminal law records training for personnel. About a third of the department completed their semi-annual CPR first aid training this month. Sergeant Greiser is continuing to go through his command and leadership training, and Sergeant Taylor completed an active shooter trainer course. That's it for the career development. One of the things that I wanted to bring before the board, I had spoken to Mr. Hellman and Ashley about. We have spent a considerable amount of money as a township for the LPRs and the video cameras at intersections in the township. Right now we have stationary LPRs at 3 intersections and cameras, I believe, at 4 to 5 intersections. And what this is getting us is we're getting a lot of the accidents that occur at these intersections on video. We already have a fee set in place for accident reports. What we've seen around the area is townships developing a fee to provide video mostly to insurance companies in response to these accident reports. So we have set a standard here at the department that when an accident is called on one of our videos, it has to be noted in the accident report, which I expect will generate requests for the video. We would like to implement a fee for this video. I had spoken previously to Casey. He told me it didn't require board approval, but it's certainly something I wanted to bring before the board before we did. One of the townships in the area that's in Delaware County that has more cameras than we do set up a fee, so we're kind of following their footsteps. They set up a sliding fee, which is, I think it was $500 to $1,000 per request. I'm speaking with them, their normal request is $500, but if it's something fatal or something that has a substantial amount of video, they just reserve the right to slide to $500. So I wanted to get your feedback on what you thought about that, and obviously we would like to do this to support the current video capabilities we have at these intersections, and certainly we'd like to get more in the future.
Yeah, can I ask a question? I'm not familiar with, I know under the right to know law, if it's a document or a record in your possession and it deals with a criminal investigation or even a non-criminal investigation, there's an exemption. So, and I guess I'm not familiar enough with, it sounds like Casey's saying you have to, the video isn't there until you choose to download it. Is that?
So one of the things that covers video, specifically it's set up with the body worn camera and the move video, is not covered under the right to know law. It's covered under Act 22, which is very similar to right to know. However, it reserves the right to the department to set the fee if the state doesn't set the fee.
But if I was just an interested citizen and I had observed the accident, could I file a right to know request and get a copy of that video?
No, not through a right to know request.
Is there anyone else in Chester County currently?
Not that I'm aware of, but in Chester County, we're probably leading the way with this video.
What is your view on the size of the fee?
That's kind of what the discussion I wanted to get with you. At that rate that I told you about, and again, they have more cameras than we do, but I was told unofficially that they got about $30,000 last year from insurance companies for the video. That certainly would help offset the cost that we're currently spending each month on to collect this video. And that's the incentive that we're probably spending now with a 4 intersections in the area of $20,000.
If I can ask Kristen, how could we implement this? Would we develop a proposal, make it a form of resolution for the board to pass? Or is this something we can just discuss tonight?
I mean, I don't know how your police department already has fees established for document requests or things, services that the police department provides. I'm not sure if the board passes those fees or you leave that to the discretion of the chief to do. If that's the case, I would say, like he's doing now, just sort of bringing you into the loop on it, getting your feedback, letting them implement that. I would say that typically your fees, again, this is new, and I'm sorry I'm not up on all the law on this, but you know, the general standard for any fee you're charging is it shouldn't be a money maker. It should be cover what your reasonable estimated expenses are. Obviously, you're not going to get that down to the penny, but so if there is a way to sort of look at the number of intersections and some sort of mathematical, you know, analysis of what your actual cost would be, I think you want to keep it. You don't want to make it exorbitant.
You don't want to make money.
Yeah, right. So. But again, you're never going to know exactly what your administrative cost is. So again, it's just a reasonable fee based on your calculated judgment on that.
Yeah, and this fee, once it's agreed to by the board for the member, it would go on our enumerated fee schedule, where all of our fees are listed, from building permits to police reports. Everything is listed. We're up to 6 or 7 pages of the various township fees. So this would just be, for example, when you pass the fire false alarm fee, that went in there as well. So this would just be another under the police services fees here.
So Chief Carroll, you mentioned that the cost at $500 would, you said, like, cover some of the $20,000 a year it's costing you in the IT piece of it, kind of.
Right, that would be the intent.
Yeah. What in terms of officer time involved in providing this, do you see that as a service that's being provided anyway, or do you see that as a takeaway from that officer providing other normal services too?
That would be an administrative function, so we would do it up front. The officers wouldn't do that. So certainly as it becomes more popular, it would require more time. Right now, it's not a heavy lift.
Okay, so you would not need to take that into account at this point.
People don't even know it exists.
Right. So it's new for us, yeah.
Excuse me, Chief Carroll, 2 questions. Are insurance companies the only ones that would be responsible for this fee? And would the townships have to get some sort of approval from the state insurance commission?
I don't believe we would need approval on that, and I don't know that we can just set it for insurance.
No, for anybody requesting a video.
It would be anybody requesting the video, not just insurance companies.
Right.
Lawyers will ask for it.
Lawyers will ask for it for wrongful death suits and everything else.
Discovery.
But is this extra fee something that you think the insurance companies are going to then pass on to?
It's a good question.
And their
I'm no
insurance,
economist, but I'm sure eventually all gets passed on.
It's all gets passed on, absolutely.
I mean, you talked about it. I totally understand why you would do it, and I think that, you know, I think it's fine. I think it's a good idea.
And it's good evidence of what exactly occurred. And it also helps you to see if there was something that
Somebody's
you
made health insurance
right?
cost though, because imagine if this video is kind of compelling evidence of actually what happened versus something that's more arbitrary and he's, you know, they said, you said kind of thing that promulgates through the court system with all the costs that go with that. This might help avoid.
To reduce costs.
It could reduce costs.
So we're not a no fault.
No,
we're not.
Oh, no.
You're in a fault state.
Absolutely.
So what is the board's view as to a fee to suggest to Chief Carroll or leave it to his discretion, subject to what he's already investigated, the $500 to $1,000 range?
I think it's up to your discretion.
And I think you already came up with it.
Yeah, I think if you're going to utilize some level of the amount of time that your officers are utilizing, if they're actually involved in those situations, you could scale it in a couple different ways, I think. Whether you do the 500, you're not really looking to figure out whether the insurance company is going to say yes or no. They're going to be in demand for this service. So I would plan it out the way you think, and if you wanted anyone on the board to give you feedback, I think.
Thank you.
Unless you have questions, that's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from the public for the chief on his report?
Yeah, I have a question.
Oh, go ahead, John.
Chief Carroll, just a question on the mileage for this month compared to last month. It's almost 2,500. more miles this month than the prior. Can you give us an idea as to why that would be?
Prior month or prior year?
Well, it says total mileage last month was 15,265, and the mileage this month was 17,855. So it was about 2,600 more miles this month than last month.
I could guess that maybe less people are on vacation than in the summer. Training's probably different, but specifically why we drove 2,000 more miles, I don't have one reason.
So nothing really pops out as to why that might be.
No.
Another question I have on the number of alarms and to whom you had to respond to. Again, the winner of the prize this month, as it seems to be every other month, is NV Homes. I'm sure they're being charged. Are these false alarms, or are they actual responding to a crime alarm?
I don't know which ones off the top of my head are actual crimes, but I don't believe we got any crimes at NV Homes that were triggered to us by alarms. I don't recall any of those.
It just says monthly alarm activation. I don't see it as being with us.
Most of the valve alarms that you'll see aren't necessarily someone breaking in. It's if a storm comes by and breaks a window and that sets off their alarm, we don't charge them for that because it wasn't their fault. So we consider that a valve alarm.
It just seems like every month there's 4 or 5 or 6 times that NV Homes has to be visited.
When they have, you'll see a lot of asterisks next to NV Homes on the report. That's because it's different buildings. So they have a lot of buildings that are still theirs that are.
So these are actually different locations then?
Yes.
Are they being charged for any false alarms that you have to respond to?
NV Homes? Absolutely.
I imagine that's becoming a cost of business for them.
Certainly seems that way.
I just wonder if there's anything that can be done to reduce the number of calls that they're imposing upon the police department, because every month it's a continual thing, besides finding them.
You would think something would be done because of the fines, and it isn't, so that's probably a question for them.
It just seems like it's an ongoing saga here.
It is.
All right, that's the only things I have.
Any other questions from the board or the public? Okay, thank you, Chief. Item 15, Board of Supervisors announcement. Last open.
I'm going to start off and say that I haven't been here in 3 weeks, and so I actually have no supervisor announcements today. I'm sorry. Next week, next month. It's so many hours that I'm supposed to already have fallen asleep by tonight.
Okay. You?
The only thing I have is I had a fine week's vacation, enjoyed it, and I'm back.
Okay. So you announced about his vacation. John, have you been on vacation yet?
Not yet.
Okay.
I have a couple announcements. This past Saturday, September the 18th, I had the opportunity and the honor to attend the Fame Fire Company dedication here. One of the fire companies, the Westchester Fire Department, that provides service to West Goshen. And they had a dedication of 3 pieces of equipment: engine number 53, rescue vehicle 53, and ladder 53. And it was well attended. There was probably 150 people there, residents as well as many firefighters from several fire companies in the area. It was a very good event. The second thing I'd like to announce is on Thursday, October the 7th, there's going to be a veterans event here in this room for all veterans who wish to attend. It's going to be sponsored by the Recorder of Deeds office here in Chester County, who are given the job of recording discharge papers for veterans. They're DD-214s, and they also provide photo IDs for veterans, as well as a discount card that's given by over 100 vendors within Chester County for the veterans. So that's going to be happening here on October the 7th. And there should also be representatives from Christy Houlihan's office as well as John Kane's office, who are both serving on veterans committees in their respective positions. So for any issues that veterans may have, they'll be able to address it to those particular offices to pursue for resolution. So just want to let everybody be aware of that.
I have a comment for you, John,
Sure.
on the recorder of deeds situation. The 214, the DD 214, which is the discharge paper, shows where the person served, has a lot of personal information on it, and it becomes a public record according to the VFW and subject to right to know laws. They specifically don't encourage the recording of your 214.
Just to explain, the way that the Recorder of Deeds office in Chester County, as in any Recorder of Deeds office, they're actually commissioned by the military to be one of the offices where they can officially record those DT 214s, and it's only for access for the veterans or the veterans' family in the case of estate sales or something like that. It's not something open to a right to know or for public knowledge.
Okay, that should be clarified then with the VFW hierarchy.
Well, I believe it is, yeah. It says the Recorder of Deeds will record the DD 214 or other discharge documents into a secure military database for safeguarding in the case of loss, misplacement, or natural disaster. You are then eligible to also receive a county-issued photo ID to earn discounts and special offers at roughly 100 businesses within Chester County. All that is part of the notice that's being sent out to the public to advertise the event.
John, actually, I just, unfortunately I wasn't able to attend the Fame Fire Company dedication. I really was signed up and then something came up at the last minute. But it does remind me that I would like the board to have a discussion at our October 5th workshop, Casey, as you know, we had lengthy discussions in the budget setting process for this year around the contributions to the volunteer fire company and to Goodfellow ambulance company, Good Fellowship Ambulance Company. I'd like the board to have an opportunity to discuss that in early October here, give direction to finance staff about the budget. Very good. So just put that on the agenda for the next couple of weeks now.
Have we heard from them about what they're requesting yet for next year?
No, we're under contract with Chester County. That's a flat fee. We have not heard from Goshen yet.
How about GFAC?
Not yet.
Or Good Fellowship?
Not yet.
Okay.
Sean, make sure you know the executive session that you're not tonight.
Yes, I'm going to get to that. Thank you. So I'd like to announce the Board of Supervisors held executive sessions on Tuesday, September the 7th, Wednesday, September the 15th, and Tuesday, September the 21st prior to this meeting to discuss legal and personnel matters. I don't have any other announcements, and I have not been on vacation yet either.
And don't forget the October 5th.
Yes, you were.
I have not.
You were in Maine.
No, I've not been yet. That's in October.
Oh, I thought that you were.
Yeah, you've been away so long, you're completely in vacation mode.
At the October 5th meeting, you have 2 conditional use hearings.
Yes.
Make sure you're aware of that. Oh, did I steal your thunder, Bill? Sorry, I just want to be asking for the agenda.
You just helped him out. He's ready to leave now.
So item number 17, Township Engineers announcements break.
We've
Oh, yes, good.
Casey, yeah.
Casey, I'm sorry.
Oh, it's all right. No problem at all. I have just 3 announcements. They're all fun. This Saturday evening, we'll be hosting one of our movies in the park, Jurassic Park, from 1995, I think, 94. Community Park, just after dusk. We're doing, since Hollywood hasn't produced any movies this year because of COVID, we're doing throwback movies to the 80s and 90s, so that should be a good time. This Saturday, September 25th, is our monthly yard waste collection. Please have your waste out Friday night or by 6 a.m. Saturday morning. And I want to jump in with Chief Carroll. We have a grant application that is due October 4th that I'd like board approval for and Sean to sign off on. It's from the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency, and it's we can get about $60,000 for the grant. There's no match required. It's 100% paid, and it's for strategies to combat crime, gang activity, including intervention, enforcement, technology, analytical capacity, and community policing initiatives for the police department. So this is just an application. We're not assured an award.
We're not assured an award by any means.
But we want to
competitive grant.
try for it.
It is, the grant is being written for more LPR cameras.
Right. Okay. So I seek approval for us to apply for that and Sean to sign off on the application.
He was made a motion to seek grant money.
It's about $60,000.
$60,000. Okay, thank you. Is there a second? Thank you, John. Any board comments or questions? Any public comments or questions about applying for the grant? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Just have to ask Casey. Casey, we have a September 30th tabletop exercise with the energy transfer.
We do.
And what time will that be?
That is 10 to noon on next Thursday. The entire county staff will be here. Energy transfer will be here. It's not open to the public, just for board observation and to get to examine our process, see if we need to tweak it at all. And it's a learning experience for the fire companies, for you, for us, police, everybody involved. So we'll have a full room of first responders here next week.
And at that time, there will be able to exercise our communications policy that we've been discussing?
Yes. It's going to go to select people in the room. Obviously, we don't want to do a public message. So what I'm doing is I'm setting up a template with specific phone numbers, text, emails. So all of you will be on there. So during the exercise, you will get messages to your phones as the test. And most of us will be getting them as well, just to see how quickly the messages go out through the system, through Blackboard Connect. And to see if you as users, waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning, can see if that message is clear and concise, and you know what to do as a resident during an emergency. Okay, so it's a learning experience for everybody.
And there'll be a post-mortem?
Absolutely. Lessons learned and ways to tweak the response as needed, absolutely.
And then hopefully out of this, we'll be able to generate an addendum to our EOP, Emergency Operation Plan. That would include a communications policy.
Yep.
All right, very good.
Yep.
Casey, just on that, we were able to arrange a subsequent discussion with Energy Transfer on that day about the noise situation.
Yeah, they're going to be here about 9 o'clock. So as long as Matt Gordon is here, he needs to be part of that discussion.
Yeah.
So as long as he is here early, but he is attending the 10 o'clock session no matter what. So if we have to chain him here after noon, he'll be here.
And you let them know we wish you to discuss.
Absolutely.
Anything else, Casey?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Rick?
The only thing I have this evening is this afternoon I attended a meeting sponsored by the County Water Resources Authority to review the draft of the upcoming revisions to the Countywide Act 167 Stormwater Plan. It was a 2-hour meeting at the Government Services Center. Not a lot of earth-shattering stuff in there. It's mostly dotting I's and crossing T's. The only thing in there that I think is going to have any impact on our residents is they're planning on substantially reducing the simplified approach applications for small projects between 500 and 2,000 square feet of additional impervious. And what that will require is that instead of using the simplified approach, the applicants will have to go to an engineer and have a fully engineered approach. And we will not have an option of doing anything other than that.
Have we any recent examples where that simplified approach has been, part of someone's application that we've managed?
No, I actually brought that up at the meeting that we've been using it since 2013. And we have not had significant problems. We've had occasional problems where you try to infiltrate and you can't because of clay or whatever. The biggest problem that we have is people don't know how to do it right, so they submit it wrong, and we have to keep correcting them until they get it right, which takes a lot of staff time. So that's the downside. The upside is by doing that, we save them engineering costs on a best management practice that is already fairly expensive. So, but I asked the question whether we could retain the existing simplified approach if we wanted to. The answer was no. DEP feels that there are enough instances where it's not properly applied and the systems are being overloaded, which we haven't seen, but I'm sure it's happening in some places, that DEP doesn't want it extensively used in the future. So the new ordinance model ordinance has to be adopted by September of 2022. It'll probably come out in final form March, April 2022. We normally adopt it pretty much immediately. We don't wait around until September because there's no point in doing that. So it's coming.
Rick, I had to drop off because my connection was terrible. But the one question I was going to ask is, are they expecting you to go and modify your existing and just say, okay, section 301 is changed as follows, or is it just adopt a whole new one from beginning to end?
My understanding is that it's going to be adopt a whole new one from beginning to end. There are still some sections where we will have latitude to adjust one way or another. Unfortunately, simplified approach is not going to be one of them.
But can't you, and this is the one thing we don't talk about now, but if it's, you still have the choice that you don't need to do full stormwater management until it's over 1,000, right? And you could say that your limit is 1,000 and above, that's what you have to do.
You could, and that's what you have discretion of where you set that lower limit. I'm not comfortable with that.
Right, no, I realize that, but that would be one, I think the board has to understand that.
Our limit right now is 500 square feet, and I'm fairly comfortable with that. I would not want to increase it, but yeah, you're right, that can be tweaked.
Yeah, so probably when we get that ordinance, we should go through it as far as the changes and the specific options. There's not a lot, but there are maybe 5 or 6 where the board can make discretionary decisions.
Yeah, we were provided today a spreadsheet of everything that's changing. So, and this is draft, it's not final, so it could be tweaked a little more, but.
When do you want us to do that? When do you want us to look at this?
Well, we have to wait till it's finalized.
November is when they said they're probably circulated.
Late this year, early next year.
Beginning of year
That's all I had.
Anything other wills at Gracetown this month?
Not really. The housing is continuing at a rapid pace. And as we've mentioned in the past few meetings, there's been basically no progress on the park or the dams or any of the other remaining infrastructure. Well, that's not true. I understand that the electronic gates for the emergency access went in yesterday. I haven't been out to look at them yet, but theoretically they went
To the
in.
age-restricted portion?
I'm sorry?
In the age-restricted portion, or?
No, the emergency access gates.
Oh, I'm sorry.
322 North Hill.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so that's a good thing.
Gotcha.
We've got some questions for you. Ms. Wills?
I have a question. I'm a grandmother of 2 children at Greystone Elementary School, and there are no school signs on Aram Avenue. When do they propose to put those up? There is a crosswalk sign, but there is nothing to indicate there is a school there. There's nothing to slow people down.
Well, it's not a school zone, so.
Well, that's up to you to make. I'm not as good as Mark, so
No.
I'm looking up stuff.
It's not up to us to make it a school zone.
It's to establish a school zone, local authorities shall be responsible to prepare and submit drawing and showing the locations where students walk along or cross roadways that are adjacent to school property, da, 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 da. It's Pennsylvania Ordinance 212.501, school zones, speed limits.
And according to the Westchester Area School District, they have no pedestrian students, and therefore we cannot put across
The
area.
children from Caswell are walking, and they have permission to
Well,
walk.
then the school district needs to tell us that, and the school district needs to request that a school zone be established.
So I need to go to them first.
But the road's not a public road yet.
And it's also
We're
not a public
jurisdiction
road.
over it yet. The township doesn't own the road yet. We're working on that.
Good point.
Nancy, I would go to the school district. I would go to them and see.
Go to them first then. Because it just, it can, and even if it's, there are children that cross there because it's a park. there's a park there as well.
But you can't classify it as a school zone because there's a park.
Okay.
So it
All
would
right,
need
we'll
to be
start with the
classified.
school district.
Yep, that would be the first step.
Any other questions for Rick?
Can we have a,
Hang on, John, I just a question.
sorry.
Rick, would you kindly just give an update on the Sunoco, the idle basins?
Both basins are currently under construction. The contractor has been delayed significantly by the weather that we've been having. This week, they put in the amended soil finally. It dried out enough that they could do that. So the amended soil layers in the first basin, they started placing some of the riprap protection today. So the work's continuing, but it's been delayed because of the amount of rain we've had.
Are they going to put down the construction, drive the rocks that are...
Right now, there's no need for the construction entrance. They are driving driving, I guess is the appropriate word, their equipment up to the edge of the road and not onto the road. And the trucks delivering materials are not going into the site to drag the mud out. So as long as that continues and there's no mud being dragged onto the road, there is no need for the rock construction entrance. If they should change their operations and start going in and out with equipment and or trucks, then they will be required to put a rock construction entrance in.
Thank you.
Yeah, my question, could you give us an update on the Pine Valley and Sunset Hollow stormwater projects, where we're at with that?
Notice to proceed's out.
Yep.
Yeah.
There's going to be a pre-construction meeting, but we don't even have that scheduled.
Right.
Okay, so it's still looking to start?
Yeah, it's in progress, but yeah, we haven't gotten to any significant progress level yet.
Okay.
Thank you, Rick. Item number 18, Township zoning officers announcements.
Well, as Kristen said, we have two conditional use hearings at the next meeting. One is for Beyond Hello, which is to amend their original conditional use application from a few years ago. And the second one is for used car sales at 115 Bulmer. It's an MPD zone property, which allows uses within the I-2 and I-3 zoning district, and automobile sales is allowed in those districts. So that property owner is seeking a conditional use to be able to do that. We do have two zoning hearings that will take place, zoning hearing number 18 and 19. Application 20 is not too far behind. Application 18 is at 838 South High Street. That is for the owner to be allowed to keep the fence that Lowe's installed without calling us first. The fence is a 6-foot high vinyl fence placed in the front yard. It's a corner lot, so they have two front yards. They're not allowed to have that fence. So they're seeking a variance for that. And at 323 St. James, the property owner is seeking relief from R3B or R3C rear yard setback. He is constructing a deck that will encroach into that 20-foot setback. So for both cases, I would recommend that we do not take any position on those. We've had similar instances in the past with the fencing. Actually, right down the street from the one that is going in, that was right along High Street. Theirs is actually not on High Street, it's on the neighboring street. I forget the name of the street. But I would recommend that we do not take a position on either of those applications. But again, that is a board's decision.
Does the board have any position or questions for Bill?
Do you want us to make a motion on not taking a position? Is it,
that's up to you. I don't think it's necessary.
Okay, we're done.
I'm good. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you. I have nothing further.
Excuse me, Sean. I just have a question for Bill.
Sure.
What's Beyond Hello asking for?
So in their original conditional use application, we all know that it was a bank and it had the drive-through. So their original application did not allow them to access the drive-through portion onto Ellis Lane. However, the law for the dispensaries has changed. Originally, they weren't allowed to have any outside sales, drive up. Now the state law has changed with COVID and it's allowed to continue. So Beyond Hello has come back to ask to be able to use that, not the Sally Port that they built for their secure drop-off, but the drive will go around that and connect into the existing driveway. So they're really not adding any additional impervious. But what that is going to do is help with the flow of traffic, because most people are not going into the dispensary anymore. They are pulling up and getting their prescription outside and then moving on. But what that's doing is creating a traffic flow within it. There's times where cars are backed out to Ellis and into the entrance of the center. So this will actually keep the flow of traffic to go right out back onto Ellis. But just to clarify, this would not, if this was not granted, it would not change anything with how they're allowed to do business. They just wouldn't be allowed to do that.
And I have a question on the building report. I don't know if you were going to do that separately or.
The building permit report.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
It's in your packet. Under zoning, shows number of permits 6 and the construction costs. Is that a typo? It says permit fees was $434,000.
I think they were transposed, right?
Yep. I don't do that.
I don't know.
Correct.
The other way around. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, moving on, agenda item number 19, approval of the Township Board of Supervisors meeting minutes of August 17th and September the 7th. There are 2 corrections to be made to the minutes, Casey. First one is from Ms. Speck, who requested that the August 17th meeting minutes, the paragraph that starts with her name.
Which page are you
On page 5.
Okay.
The 1, 2, 3, 4th paragraph.
Yep, I see it.
Yeah, her name is Caroline with a C-A-R-O-L-I-N-E. She requested the correct spelling of her name. It's also that she actually had stated that she agrees on the need for stormwater management, but not the establishment of a fee.
Okay, gotcha.
She also requested that what she had stated was that isn't there another way of funding the work, such as federal government grants or funding, or from the existing budget through savings elsewhere within the budget.
Okay, could you send that?
I will send you that.
Perfect. Thank you.
And then on September the 7th, Margie requested a couple of corrections for her piece on page 6.
Nope. Page 5.
I'm sorry. Let me go back to August 17th, page 6. Correction there. Ms. Swartz stated that they were then double dipping, or it should read, Ms. Swartz stated that it could be considered that they were double dipping, and that Mr. Laurent passed it down. Correct that. And then on September the 7th, second page, 3rd paragraph. Find it. Third paragraph from the bottom. Margie suggested that rates be based on actual water usage, not on small homes versus large homes. So are there any board questions or other corrections on the meeting minutes?
Maybe approve of those corrections.
Second.
Thank you, Ashley. Any last chance for questions from the board? Any other questions or comments from the public? Margie?
I just had a clarification on the September 7th meeting minutes, page 3. I'm just going off memory, but when the discussion took place about the stormwater projects, I thought I recalled Mr. Hellman asking
if there were project cost estimates on those projects, and at the time they didn't have them. However, in the meeting minutes, it's showing cost estimates.
Yeah, those were just estimates from our staff. They weren't engineers' estimates from Carroll Engineering yet. Those are just ballparks from our staff.
I remember I suggested based on the engineering cost, that the total construction cost was going to be, came up with some numbers, we discussed it, and we kind of settled on roughly what the numbers were, which is what's reflected here.
Okay, so when these projects go out to bid,
They
this
could be
number
radically different numbers.
Oh, yeah, we'll get a construction cost estimate when Carroll is done with the design, and then we go out to, bid.
Okay.
So these numbers could be off by, who knows?
All right, thank you.
Or right off.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those against say nay. Minutes are approved 5-0. Thank you. Agenda item number 20, approval of the Treasurer's Report dated August the 31st for the General Fund, the Sewer Reserve Fund, the Waste and Recycling Fund, and the Capital Reserve Fund, and the bills to be paid from these funds. Are there any board questions or comments? You has made a motion for the bills to be paid from these funds.
I'll second.
Thank you. Any final chance for questions from the board? Casey, I have one question. I noticed again there are a lot of reimbursements for background checks.
Correct. These are the summer camp counselors' background checks that we're still reimbursing for. We're just chasing down those.
So are this many counselors or this many applicants? Is that why there's so many reimbursements?
It's only actively employed counselors. So we'll employ 60 counselors.
60? Okay.
Yep.
Thanks for educating.
Yeah, absolutely. We try to keep our student to teacher ratio to about 10 to 1. So we employ a lot of camp counselors.
Any public comments? Bonnie?
Just a quick question. I've asked this question in the past, and I forget, it might have been addressed. But who approves the actual invoices? Like if I'm just going through here, as a citizen, can I feel confident that all these expenditures, invoices have been looked at, and there's a department head signature or somebody's signature before they get to the board? Or are you looking for the board to give approval and nobody's really looked at them?
It's probably looked at by 6 or 7 people before it comes to the board, including me, the finance director, department heads, the administrative assistants, even our new staff accountant, Tia, looks at them. Accounts payable clerk looks at them. She gets them first, distributes them. There are, again, 6 or 7 people before they come to the board.
Okay, and then the per diem cost was a topic that we discussed a meeting or 2 ago. And just doing some research on that, I saw where if the hotel that the employee is staying at offers a continental breakfast or a breakfast of some sort, then they should not be charging or receiving the breakfast per diem for that day. Are the employees aware of that? Are they deducting that per diem?
We deduct automatically.
Yeah,
Okay.
if some of the conferences we attend, a lunch is provided, that's cut out.
Okay.
So yeah, absolutely.
All right, great, that's good to hear. And then on the medical benefits, every month there's always a lot of reimbursements.
Well, they're not reimbursements, they're paid.
Okay. I know the township went to a high deductible a couple of years ago, and it's what, like $1,500?
It's $1,500 for a single person and $3,000 for a family.
Okay. I thought I heard somebody say somewhere along the line, I could be wrong, but just clarification. Does the township reimburse the employee for those
Absolutely
deductibles?
not a dollar.
All right.
So each family is responsible up to $3,000 a year, and then the insurance kicks in.
Okay.
So we have employees who go 4 or 5 years with never having their insurance hit for anything. They pay entirely.
Okay. I think that's all I had. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the Treasurer's Report of the bills to be paid? Okay, all those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, say nay. Motion passes 5-0.
Agenda item number 21, public comment for items not on the agenda. Are there other issues that need to be raised tonight? Ms. Wills?
I'm sorry, I have another question about Parent Avenue. If it's not a public road, do you enforce the speed limit?
No, it's a private street.
So that's why the people can fly down that hill even though there's a crosswalk there?
Yes, the street going up to Lincoln Park is a driveway.
Yes.
There's no speed enforcement on that, that's private property.
So when will the township take over that road so that people aren't going like 35 and 40 miles an hour when
We're
they're children?
working on dedication right now, on Aaron. That driveway going up to the school will never be dedicated as a street, it's not built as a street.
Okay, but I'm more concerned about them coming down Aaron Avenue, and there's a lot of construction trucks that are going quite fast.
And we have no jurisdiction over it right now, at all for anything.
And so there's no proposed date, or?
We're working on it. It's a very lengthy process to dedicate it, especially, it's 4.2 miles long, with both sides included, so it's going to take us several months to get it dedicated.
Okay, because it concerns me that we have a lot of children there now. And while this process works out, we can get hit by a car.
It is a concern. I'd be happy to work with you to talk to the school district.
Because I did bring it up to a school board member, and they said, it's a private road. And so they can't ask you to be, to do something because it's still a private road.
I think that the school district would have an interest in at least talking about it and hearing your concerns, so.
Okay. Thank you.
Doug?
A couple of comments. First, Chris, welcome. Congratulations on your appointment. Also on the National Land Trust managing the park, I know that's been talked about for many years. The question for Casey, is the cost supposed to be that we're going to pay National Land? The figure that was thrown around was around $100,000 a year. That could be.
That's been bandied about for several years, and once we get a proposal, we'll see.
So I think what was explained to me was the cost was going to be offset by the increased tax base, basically paid for by the.
That's I can't say that.
Okay, and also as far as thinning the herd back there for the deer, I can see what Ashley's saying because probably starting in the 90s, I was told by my parents, don't go back there for thinning the herd. It was very dangerous.
And it's private property too.
Yeah, so, well, in the 70s and 80s, we spent a lot of time like that. But anyway, so it would be good if Natural Lands did another way of, we don't want, I would prefer there not be hunting back there with people walking through the park on the trails and the homeowners because it's not the same as it was. So, just an idea.
Thanks, Doug. Any other public comments or questions? Margie?
Hello? Is this on? It is?
You set the little switch on it there.
That's all right. I'll speak loud. My name is Margie Swart. Recently, a West Goshen Township employee reached out to me and disclosed abuse of taxpayer funds. By definition, they are a whistleblower. But for fear of losing their job, if they brought the matter to light, I became a whistleblower by proxy. The employee whistleblower revealed that all employees who work a Tuesday through Friday schedule are gifted by the township manager an additional 50 to 60 hours of paid time off per year per employee, unearned and unapproved. Alternately, employees who work a Monday through Thursday schedule don't receive those same inflated paid time off hours. Instead, they may reap 10 to 15 hours per employee of unearned and unapproved additional paid time off. This is a classic timesheet fraud scheme, collecting taxpayer dollars for which one is not entitled. It's plausible that literally millions of taxpayer dollars have been diverted for ill-gotten gains, if what Mr. Lalonde proclaims to be true, that this has been taking place for the past 40 years. Precedent doesn't deem a dishonest act proper or legal. It is your duty, your responsibility, to determine if this practice is a violation of public policy and trust. What are you going to do about it? And personally, I'd like to hear from each one of you how you feel about this practice that's supposedly been going on for 40 years.
Okay, thank you, Margie. The board is aware of your concern and comments. We have discussed the matter with Casey as the township manager, and we believe that the township manager has the discretion and the right to reward employees, if that's the way you see it, in terms of providing them an early dismissal on certain days of the year. And it's entirely within his discretion, and the board supports it, and it has been in practice for a long time. As you've read that piece of paper out in your words, I believe there are mischaracterization. There are accusations in there that are unsubstantiated and unfounded in terms of ill-gotten gains, etc. As far as the board is concerned, we've addressed the issue. So thank you.
Okay, I'd like to respond to that.
Well, I don't think I want to hear a response. We're not engaging in a Q&A dialogue. That's the right of the board that answered your question, your allegation. So if you have another question, please ask it. Otherwise, sit down. Thank you.
No, I'm going to keep speaking.
I'm not going to let you keep speaking. I've answered your question.
Why can't we just have a dialogue?
No, I don't want a Q&A unless the board
but
wants to override me and say we want a Q&A with you.
It's not a Q&A. I mean,
Well, I don't want to have a rebuttal from you because I'll just have to have another rebuttal. We've answered your question. We've addressed it with Mr. Lalonde. Any other board member wish to engage Margie in a dialogue on this? No one wants to engage you on this. Please sit down.
I would like to know why the employees aren't required to use their personal time off or their vacation hours.
We've
for
allowed
that
the town.
time.
I'm not going to.
These are my tax dollars. They're this tax
I would
dollars.
like a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Of the township. We
You have
cannot
made a motion
pay
to adjourn the meeting. For a second.
We cannot pay
All in
employees
favor of
for
adjourning the
time
meeting,
they did not work.
say aye.
They have over
Aye.
300
Thank you.
hours
Meeting's adjourned.
of personal vacation and sick time per year. Over 300 hours. They should just subtract those hours from their benefits. This is just crazy. Why? It's fine. I don't have a problem with giving these people allowing them to leave early, but they can't leave